Chapter 36-33. Mu Yichen was a prideful person. After all, he was Mu Yaja's son and had inherited Mu Yaja's arrogance. However, in front of Yun Shirshir, Yu Yu, and Mu Yaja, he had always been a warm boy. However, in front of outsiders, he was a miniature version of Mu Yaja. How could he bow down to Gong Xiaoying? Whether it was threats or coercion, Xiao Yichen would never give in to him. When Gong Xiaoying heard this, the muscles on his face twitched and he was furious. He finally lost control of his emotions and stood up. Glaring at Xiao Yichen, he said, "I'm not threatening you. I'm not trying to scare you. If I can erase Yu Yu's memory, I can erase yours too." It would have been better if he hadn't mentioned this. When he did, Xiao Yichen shouted at him furiously, "You're the one who erased Yu Yu's memory. Just based on this, don't expect me to acknowledge you. Gong Xiaoying, in the past, I respected you because you were Mommy's biological father and my grandfather. Whether you admit it or not, I respected you. However, it doesn't mean that you can bully others. What right do you have to erase Yu Yu's memory? What right do you have? Don't you love Mommy the most? If you love Mommy, why would you do something that would make her sad?" Gong Xiaoying was stunned and looked at him in surprise. He had expected this child to be angry, but he didn't expect him to be so calm even though he was angry. He was too calm. Gong Xiaoying said coldly, "Aren't you worried that if I erased Yu Yu's memory, I can erase yours too?" "You can't erase it." Xiao Yichen said expressionlessly, "Even if you want to erase it, you can't erase mine." "Where does your confidence come from?" Gong Xiaoying scoffed. "Memories that can't be erased. I'd like to see what kind of memory Alice can't erase." "No, don't." At the side, Lisa struggled to raise her head. She opened her eyes and said weakly, "Don't." She was still under the effects of the anesthetic. As a result, he stuttered when he spoke, and his reactions were also extremely slow. However, when she heard that Gong Xiaoying had threatened Xiao Yichen that he would erase his memory, she suddenly became nervous. Gong Xiaoying shouted, "You betrayed me. You have no right to speak here." "I didn't betray." Lisa spat out a few words with difficulty. Her words were intermittent and incoherent. Xiao Yichen looked at her. However, he heard Lisa say firmly, You faster? I didn't betray him." Ever since that day when Gong Jie brought her to Yu Yu and told her that he was the person she would be loyal to for the rest of her life, she swore to herself that Yu Yu was her only master. Unless she died or Yu Yu died, she would never change her heart. Yu Yu was her only master. Even if she had to betray the whole world, she would never betray the person she was loyal to. She had never betrayed Yu Yu. Hence, she was not a traitor. Lisa suddenly said in a powerful voice, "Me? Not a traitor." Xiao Yichen was stunned. After a short moment of shock, he smiled. "Lisa, it wasn't that he wasn't moved. He was touched by Lisa's sincerity." Chapter 36-34. Gong Xiaoying looked at Mu Yichen but didn't say anything in the end. He suddenly stood up and looked at Mu Yichen meaningfully. He said coldly, "Looks like you won't give up until you see the coffin. I'd like to see whose memory I can't erase." After he finished speaking, he immediately ordered his subordinates, "Bring Alice here." A few minutes later, two of his subordinates brought Alice in. Rather than saying that she was invited in, it was more accurate to say that she was forced in. When Alice walked into the darkroom, she saw Xiao Yichen and Lisa tied to the chairs and unable to move. Her gaze was shocked and she became sullen. "Boss, how could you tie Xiao Yichen up? He's your grandson." Gong Xiaoying looked at her coldly from the corner of his eyes. Suddenly, he walked in front of her and slapped her. Alice's face was instantly slapped to the side. "Don't think that I don't know what you've done. You can't escape the responsibility of swapping the two children. You know very well whether or not you're the one who did it. Do you need me to remind you of anything?" When Xiao Yichen saw this, he stared nervously at Gong Xiaoying and immediately warned him, "Don't hurt her." "Xiao Yichen." Alice turned her back to him and stopped him. "Don't talk. This has nothing to do with you." Xiao Yichen was stunned for a moment. Alice turned her face. There seemed to be some emotions in her eyes. She looked steadily at Gong Xiaoying. Her chest rose and fell for a long time. Suddenly, she smiled bleakly. I know that I betrayed you. I deserve this slap. But boss, what kind of deep hatred do you have that you can't let go of it after so many years? What kind of deep hatred do you have that you want to take revenge on these two children? They were still so young. Yu Yu's memories were erased. It was sealed by my hypnosis. However, ever since his memories were sealed, there wasn't a single day that I didn't regret it. Look at Yu Yu, what has he become? Gong Xiaoying was startled and suddenly stopped talking. Do you think you're doing this for Yu Yu? He had forgotten all his memories. He had forgotten Xianxia and Mu Yaja. He had even forgotten who he was. Do you think this is for his own good? You have no right to do this, and you have no right to erase Yu Yu's memory and tamper with his life. Shut up. Gong Xiaoying interrupted coldly. I don't need you to tell me what to do. You're high and mighty, you're insufferably arrogant. Now, the Gong family can call the wind and summon the rain, looking down on everything. No one has the right to criticize you about what you're doing. Alice's lips suddenly trembled violently as she spoke. Yu Yu is innocent. He's just a child. He just wants to be by his mommy's side. Look at how cute Yu Yu used to be. He was with his family and he was smiling every day. But now, he's become a cruel, cold, and insensitive person. He's also become someone with terrifying ambitions and hatred that shouldn't exist at his age. He's just a child. How can you bear to torture him like this? Chapter 36-35. Alice did not care about anything else. If you persist in doing this, your daughter will never forgive you. Gong Xiaoying's pupils constricted as he stared fixedly at Alice. It was as if he was an explosive that could explode at any moment. Alice had always been fearful of Gong Xiaoying. However, there was no trace of fear in her eyes right now. Right now, I want you to seal this child's memory, just like how you sealed Yun Tianyou's. She would not make the same mistake a second time, even though she had no feelings for Xiao Yichen. However, perhaps because she could no longer have children in this lifetime, she could understand the pain of a mother and son turning against each other. Hence, she could understand Yun Shirshi's pain, as well as Yu Yu and Xiao Yichen's pain. She had already killed Yun Tianyu. She could not kill Xiao Yichen as well. Gong Xiaoying glanced at Mu Yichen before returning his gaze to Alice. His tone was full of threat. Do it right now. Alice took a deep breath and rejected him coldly. I don't want to do this kind of thing again. She mustered up her courage and rejected him with an incomparable conviction. She knew what the consequences of going against the man's order were and what it meant. The man standing in front of her was the head of the Gong family. What's more, he was the person with the highest authority in the Hurricane Group. Alice knew very well what it meant to go against his order. It was just that she was unwilling to do so and was even more unwilling to comply with his decision. Gong Xiaoying did not expect Alice to go against his order. His gaze turned stern as he sized her up in disbelief. He was so angry that he laughed. Do you know what you're saying? I know, and I know very well that I'm going against your order. You asked me to wipe Xiao Yichen's memory, but I said, no. Alice's tone gradually softened as she spoke. Boss, please, don't go on like this. You've already hurt Yun Shirsher and Yun Tianyu once. How can you bear to do it again? Do you really want to fall out with Yun Shirsher and her father? Gong Xiaoying was stunned for a moment before he regained his senses. He gritted his teeth and said, whether it's Mu Yichen or Yun Tianyu, didn't she get together with Mu Yaja because they have 2 children? Now, if the 2 children are in my hands, she'll go home. At the mention of Yun Shirsher, gentleness appeared in his eyes. The reason why he hated Mu Yaja so much was not just because of the previous generation's feud. He knew that Yun Shirsher gave birth to these 2 children because she was a surrogate mother for the Muse when she was 18. She, Gong Xiaoying's daughter, his daughter, was so lowly that she was used by the Muse. How could his daughter do such a despicable thing? How dare the Muse? Therefore, he could never forgive the Mu family and Mu Yaja for doing such a thing to his daughter. So what if Yun Shirsher returns to your side? Alice hysterically tried to wake him up. What's the difference between you and an executioner? Shut up. Gong Xiaoying stopped her. Don't think that I won't dare to touch you just because you're Gong Jie's woman. Even if I kill you today. Chapter 36:36. Alice was not afraid at all. My life is in your hands. The fate of so many people in the hurricane group is also in your hands. Killing me is just a matter of words. But don't you regret it? You, Gong Xiaoying raised his hand high, but Alice just stared at him without retreating. However, his hand did not fall for a long time. Do you think you're the only one who knows hypnotism? Gong Xiaoying's hand fell slowly, but he laughed coldly. Do you think I can't do it without you? Alice was stunned. Gong Xiaoying turned around and said in a low voice, Come in. As soon as his voice fell, he saw the door slowly open, and a man wearing a white cloak slowly walked in. The man was very young and very thin. He was wearing a cloak, but it seemed empty. His face was buried under the brim of the hat, and the shadow covered his eyes. But it was not difficult to see that this man's features were exquisite. It was just that this exquisiteness was mixed with some elements of gender. There was a gloomy and cold aura around him, like a poisonous snake, beautiful but deadly. It had nothing to do with gender. This kind of beauty could make people hold their breath and focus. He was holding a crystal ball in his hand. However, this crystal ball looked a little special. Inside the transparent glass, there was a ball of purple fog, swirling and rolling. Mu Yichen's heart skipped a beat when he raised his head and saw the man. He did not know why, but this man had an especially dangerous aura. As the man walked in, he took off his hat. His face was exposed to the air. It was feminine but beautiful. When Alice saw him, she sucked in a breath of cold air. Master, senior? Back then, she had studied hypnotism under a master hypnotist. There were only a few students under the master's name. Hypnotism also required talent. There were not many people who had this kind of talent. It could be said that it was 1 in a million. As for this man, he was one of her senior martial brothers. His hypnotism skills were above hers. How could it be her? The man glanced at her and acted as if she didn't exist. He walked to Gong Xiaoying and nodded slightly in greeting. Unless he was hypnotized, he was usually very quiet and did not speak much. However, as soon as he spoke, the first sentence he said was enough to bewitch the mind of the person who was being hypnotized. His voice seemed to have a unique magic power. Sometimes, Alice felt that his hypnotism was not hypnotism, but a kind of magic that could not be explained by scientific means. Senior, why are you here? The man turned around and finally saw her. His deep eyes were like a dark black jade without any luster, but like a bottomless pool of water. Just a glance, it seemed to be able to suck one's soul. Gong Xiaoying said coldly, Seal up all of that child's past memories, do you understand? The man nodded gently. It was just one word, but it was as cold as the ice and snow of the North Pole, causing people to feel a chill in their hearts. Senior, you can't do that, Alice said in a panic. You can't erase this child's memory, Senior. Take her away. Gong Xiaoying ordered impatiently. Chapter 36:37. The man in the white robe walked slowly to Xiao Yichen and squatted down gracefully. His dark eyes scanned every inch of Xiao Yichen's features and his thin lips slowly curved into a cold smile. Just by looking into his eyes, Xiao Yichen felt as if his body was frozen and he couldn't move. At the side, Lisa saw this and started to struggle. The man glanced at her from the corner of his eyes but didn't take her seriously. No matter how powerful she wouldn't be a threat if she was tied up like this. However, with someone else around, it would be easy to disrupt the hypnosis if they made any noise during the hypnosis. The man said softly, Take her away. Take her away. Gong Xiaoying gave the order and Lisa was immediately taken out of the room. He also left with his men. All the doors were locked from the inside. The man slowly lifted the crystal ball and held it in front of Xiao Yichen. The latter was attracted by the illusory purple fog in the crystal ball and his eyes suddenly lost focus. He felt as if he was about to enter the man's world. He immediately pinched his palms and forced himself to wake up. Xiao Yichen shook his head forcefully and turned his face away from the man. If he didn't look at him, he wouldn't be hypnotized. The man smiled faintly. He had hypnotized countless people, but most of them were unwilling to do so. Who do you want to see the most now? The man gently placed his hand on the surface of the crystal ball and caressed it. He said casually, "Is it her?" When Xiao Yichen heard this, he couldn't help but be attracted by the man's words. He turned his head and looked at the crystal ball. However, he saw that the fog in the crystal ball gradually transformed and reflected Yun Shishir's gentle smile. Mommy, Xiao Yichen was completely shocked. He could actually see Yun Shishir's face in the crystal ball. The man observed his expression and asked faintly, "Who is she?" Xiao Yichen looked at him and bit his lip hard, but he didn't say anything. Cold sweat, drop by drop, continuously slid down from his forehead and flowed into the gaps between his lips. It was extremely bitter. "Oh, that's not her?" The man stroked the surface of the crystal ball again. Xiao Yichen stared intently at the crystal ball. The fog continued to transform, and a tender but adorable face was reflected in the crystal ball. "Yueyao, Yueyao." Xiao Yichen suddenly became agitated. He struggled, but the more he struggled, the tighter his hands were tied. "What are you trying to do?" he questioned angrily. The man smiled and held the crystal ball in front of him. In the crystal ball, that tender and cute face slowly came to life. Yueyao opened her eyes wide and stretched out her hands towards him. "Brother, hug, Yueyao, is she the one you want to see?" The man stroked the crystal ball again, and the fog transformed into Yu's face again. However, Yu's eyes were cold as if she was a stranger. Yu, who was reflected in the fog, suddenly opened her mouth and spoke. "Muichin, don't come back." Her voice was cold, but every word was cruel and heartless. Xiao Yichen was stunned. He frowned and couldn't believe that Yu had said those words. But he smiled bitterly and said to Yu, "Why don't you come back?" "Because no one needs you." Chapter 36-38. He didn't know why, but no matter how tough the environment was or how hopeless the situation was, Xiao Yichen's heart was about to break when he heard Yu's words. "You don't need me, that's right." Yu echoed in the crystal ball, "No one needs you." Xiao Yichen's pupils gradually lost focus. He stared at the crystal ball numbly. A line of tears slowly flowed down from his left eye. One tear, followed by another. In an instant, his face was covered with tears. The man looked at him as if he had been hypnotized. He smirked coldly. "It's not like that." Xiao Yichen suddenly looked up and said angrily, breaking down, "It's not like that. Yu wouldn't say such things. This isn't Yu. This is an illusion created by you." The man smiled and said, "I'm not a sorcerer and I don't know magic. This isn't created by me. It's your inner world." He inched closer to little Yichen and slowly breathed in through his thin lips. "You yearn to be needed and valued. You're afraid of being outlawed and ignored, right? But you're not needed and you're not relied on. They don't need you." "It's not like that." Xiao Yichen screamed crazily, "You're bewitching me again. I want mommy, daddy, you, and Yueyao. They all need me, they all need me." He was irreplaceable. He was Muichin. The man smiled and said, "Have you been lying to yourself all this time?" Muichin gritted his teeth. Suddenly, he leaned over and hit the crystal ball in his hand. With a loud crack, the crystal ball fell to the ground and shattered into pieces. The fog in the sphere slowly rose. Muichin could only feel the fog gradually condensing. Finally, it transformed into Yu's appearance. A living Yu was standing right in front of him, as if he could reach out and touch her. The entire world was plunged into darkness. It was so dark that one couldn't even see one's fingers. Everything had changed. The white-robed man also seemed to have disappeared. Muichin lowered his head and looked at his body. There were no ropes, no handcuffs, no chains, and no chair. He stood up and looked up. Yu was still standing in front of him, but she did not disappear. "Yu." Muichin anxiously rushed towards him and held him in his arms. His body was so cold that it was as if he had no body temperature. "Why is it so cold?" He nervously grabbed Yu's shoulders and sized him up. However, Yu coldly pushed him away. "Don't touch me." As Yu Yu spoke, his gaze landed on the necklace around his father's neck, only to see a necklace around his neck. It was a purple crystal. All of a sudden, Yu Yu forcefully tore the amethyst off and casually dropped it on the ground. You, don't call my name. Yu Yu turned around coldly. Muichin, no one needs you anymore. Mommy and Yueyao already have me. No one wants you to come back. So, he slowly turned his head. His eyes were covered by the shadows. His lips were curled into an extremely cold smile. Don't come back. No, it's not like that. Muichin shook his head in disbelief and forced a bitter smile. Yu Yu, I know you lost your memory and don't remember me. But it's okay. You will definitely regain your memory. Chapter 36-39. Xiao Yichen stared at Yu Yu in disbelief. He did not understand why he would say such a thing. In his impression, Yu Yu was a tsundere, but he had a gentle heart. He would never monopolize Mommy's love. This was not Yu. However, the person standing in front of him, with those familiar eyes, was clearly Yu Yu. But why would Yu Yu say such cruel words? Yu Yu saw that Xiao Yichen did not speak, so he asked coldly, haven't you noticed? No matter what, Mommy always prioritizes me. In her heart, I've always been more important than you. You should have noticed this, right? Xiao Yichen's face turned ashen. Mommy had always prioritized you. This had always been the case. This was because Yu Yu's health was not good. Yu Yu was good at pretending to be obedient. Xiao Yichen prided himself as an elder brother. Hence, he knew how to take care of Yu Yu, regardless of how big or small the matter was. Even if Mommy valued Yu Yu more than him, it did not matter. Even if Daddy valued Yu Yu more than him, it did not matter. This was because Yu Yu was his younger brother. His most beloved younger brother. No one could replace his position in his heart. Whether it was Mommy, Daddy, Yu Yu, or Yueyao, they were all his dearest family members. They were all unique and could not be replaced. However, when he heard Yu Yu say such cruel words, Xiao Yichen could not help but feel a sense of loss. A smug look appeared on Yu Yu's face. Mommy loves me more. Compared to me, you're nothing in Mommy's heart. Xiao Yichen glared at him and clenched his fists. He suddenly lowered his head, looking extremely disappointed. Yu Yu sized him up arrogantly and said casually, I went missing for a year. Mommy didn't eat or drink. When she found out about my whereabouts, she was willing to use you to replace me and bring me home. What about you? You can only stay on this huge island all by yourself. It's not like that, oh? Yu Yu asked calmly, then what is it? Muichin, you don't have to deny it. Mommy values me more than you. Mommy and Mommy have depended on each other since we were young. What about you? How can you compare yourself to me? As he spoke, he smiled coldly. You don't have to come back. I'm enough for Mommy. Little Yichen smiled bitterly and raised his head, revealing a trail of tears on his face. He smiled with tears in his eyes and said gently, even if Mommy loves you the most, it doesn't matter. I won't be sad. Because you're my younger brother. Yu Yu, who was standing in front of him, was in a daze. You're my younger brother. I'll give you everything. I won't fight with you. Don't worry, I won't be sad. Xiao Yichen wanted to hug him as he said this. With a look of disgust, Yu Yu broke free from him and flung his hand away. Don't touch me with your hand. Yu Yu said coldly, I don't want an older brother like you. Xiao Yichen was stunned. Yu Yu's words pierced his heart like a knife through butter. Why? Xiao Yichen forced a smile, but it was stiff. Is it because I didn't do well enough? Or, you don't like me? It's not that I don't like you. I hate you. Yu Yu's eyes were fierce. If it weren't for you, Mommy would only belong to me. I hate people who want to steal Mommy from me. I didn't steal her. Chapter 36-40. After a pause, Muichin said nervously, Mommy only belongs to you. I won't snatch her away, okay? You, don't be like this. As he said this, he helplessly reached out to grab Yu Yu's hand. However, Yu took half a step back in disgust. It was as if he felt dirty just by touching him. Don't touch me. Yu Yu's figure gradually blurred and turned into a thin mist before dissipating. No! Xiao Yichen pounced on him sadly, but it was all in vain. When he looked up again, the scene in front of him had changed again. He saw Xianxia stroll. His home. At this moment, he couldn't tell if he was in a dream or reality. Xianxia bit his lip hard and tried to walk forward. He stood outside the main door. Through the lanyard and across the courtyard, he saw Xianxia carrying Yueyao through the floor-to-ceiling windows. "Mommy!" He anxiously groped for the door and tried to open it, but the door was locked from the inside. He was blocked outside the door and couldn't get in. "Mommy, open the door!" Wuxia shouted frantically, "Mommy, it's me, Xianxia. I'm back." However, no one paid attention to him. It was as if he was a ball of air that no one could see. A sense of loneliness enveloped him. Wuxia suddenly felt that he couldn't breathe. The feeling of being completely ignored overwhelmed him. "Mommy, can you hear me?" Wuxia's throat was blocked. He choked and said, "It's me. I'm Xianxia. Open the door and let me in, okay? I want to go home." Yu's voice suddenly came from inside the house. "Yueyao, your brother is here." Xianxia retreated back to Lanshan. Through the floor-to-ceiling window, he saw Yueyao staggering towards Yu. Xianxia and Wuxia stood at the side, looking at him with gratified expressions. Yu hugged Yueyao and lovingly hugged the cuddly little ball in his arms. Yueyao hugged Yu's neck tightly and smiled. "Brother!" This clear and loud sentence made everyone beam with joy. Xianxia heard Yueyao's laughter through the window and couldn't help but laugh as well. He hadn't seen Yueyao for a long time and missed her very much. Now, just hearing her clear voice warmed his heart. Yueyao, his little princess. Xianxia stood outside the villa and looked on eagerly. However, the warm scene in the house seemed to have nothing to do with him. He wanted to go home more and more, to return to that warm home. He missed Mommy Yueyao and Daddy so much, he missed Yu so much. Xianxia went back to the main door and pressed the doorbell forcefully. However, no matter how long he pressed it or how many times he pressed it, no one answered him. Outside, the cold wind gradually became bitterly cold. He was shivering from the cold. Wuxia couldn't wait any longer. He nimbly climbed over the door and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window. Standing outside, he gently knocked on the door and window and smiled gently. "Mommy!" "Yu! Daddy, Yueyao." Xianxia tidied his clothes seriously and smiled. "I'm going home." Everyone in the house suddenly fell silent. Xianxia and Wuxia turned around. Yu also turned around with Yueyao in her arms. However, when her gaze landed on Xianxia, her expression immediately turned cold. Chapter 3641. Yu walked to the floor-to-ceiling window and pulled the door open. He asked coldly, "Why did you come back?" Xianxia's smile froze. He said in a daze, "Because this is my home." "This is not your home. This is my home. Get out." Yu pointed at the door and said coldly, "You're not welcome here." "How could this be?" Xianxia gasped and looked at Yu. However, he heard Xianxia's cold voice. "Don't stand here. You're an eyesore." He looked in the direction of the voice and saw Xianxia walking towards him. Xianxia reached out his arms and wanted to hug her. However, Xianxia slammed the window and locked it from the inside. Xianxia was once again locked outside the door. He was dumbfounded. "Mommy," Xianxia said disdainfully through the floor-to-ceiling window, "don't come back. I don't want to see you." "Why?" Xianxia finally panicked. He anxiously knocked on the door and window as tears streamed down his face. He cried painfully. Mommy, it's me. I'm Xianxia. Did I do something wrong? Why don't you want to see me?" Mommy? The man in the white robe stood up slowly. He held the crystal ball in his hand and stared coldly at Wuxia, who was tied to the chair and had already entered a hallucination. Wuxia leaned against the back of the chair and closed his eyes. His brows were furrowed as he kept muttering, "Mommy? Don't leave me. Mommy." From the moment he broke the crystal ball, Xianxia had already entered a hypnotic environment. Everything he saw was a hallucination that he had created. The highest level of hypnotism was to dig out the deepest, darkest part of a person. Everyone had their darkest side. Even Xianxia was no exception. In the deepest part of his heart, there was a fatal fear. In reality, Xianxia looked cheerful, gentle, and adorable on the outside, but he didn't realize that deep down he was afraid of losing Xianxia's attention. He had always known that Xianxia placed more emphasis on Yu. It was difficult to balance a bowl of water. It was hard to be fair when it came to doting on two people. Xianxia had always known that Xianxia took care of Yu more. It wasn't that he wasn't envious, but as an older brother, he didn't care. However, deep in his heart, he still longed for Xianxia to love him more. She wanted to be on par with Yu. However, these selfish thoughts had always been suppressed at the bottom of his heart. Xianxia didn't care who his mommy loved more. Whether it was his mommy or Yu, they were all inseparable family. As long as he could be with his family, he was already very satisfied. However, through hypnotism, the uneasiness in his heart, as well as the fear of being ignored, were magnified several times. The hypnotism created an illusion for him. Through this illusion, he would face the deepest fear in his heart. This fear would be magnified continuously, and it would become an unbearable nightmare. This nightmare was an incomparably cold world. He couldn't walk out at all, and it would be difficult for him to escape. Chapter 3642. Wuxia sat on the chair, his eyelashes trembling violently. Then, a teardrop slowly flowed out of his eye. Despair! The white-robed man let out a faint sigh. No matter how strong a person's mind was, it would be difficult for him to accept the despair of betrayal. In Xianxia's heart, whether it was Xianxia, Wuxia, Yu, or Yueyao, they were very important to him. It went without saying how important they were. Entering such a despairing illusion must be very despairing. The white-robed man scrutinized his face. Suddenly he sensed something strange. Xianxia's expression gradually softened. It was the kind of softness that came from relief. Yueyao, as he softly muttered her name, his lips curved into a doting and warm smile. He seemed to be relieved. What's going on? The white-robed man stared at him in shock. He had entered his hypnotic illusion. An experienced hypnotist could easily enter the hypnotized person's environment. He entered Xianxia's illusion and saw Xianxia standing alone at the entrance of the villa. He looked like an orphan who had been abandoned by the world. His back view was bleak and lonely. However, he hid in the bushes outside the villa. He leaned against the railings and looked at the courtyard. The man walked to his side. He could see through the illusion and see the scene in Xianxia's imagination. Xianxia could not see him. He could also see what he could see through little Xianxia's eyes. In the courtyard, Yu sat on the swing. Xianxia stood beside him and gently pushed him. Yu was having fun and let out a string of bell-like laughter. Ah, mommy, higher. Higher. But Xianxia laughed and pushed him higher. Wuxia stood to the side with Yueyao in his arms, watching everything with a gentle gaze. The family of four, without Xianxia, was still happy and harmonious. Xianxia didn't dare to rashly barge in again and disturb the peace. He stood guard outside the door and secretly watched this scene, but his heart was filled with happiness. Especially when he heard Yu's crisp laughter, the smile on his face deepened. Be careful. Even though he knew that no one could hear him, he was still worried that the swing would swing too high and Yu would accidentally fall. From the anticipation and envy in his eyes, it could be seen that he really wanted to join them. However, he didn't dare to destroy this beautiful moment. He knew that he was no longer welcome and was no longer accepted. However, he still harbored a tiny bit of hope. Even if he were to hide in a corner where they couldn't see him, he would still be satisfied watching this scene. The white-robed man was a little shocked. He squatted down and scrutinized Wuxia. It was hard to imagine that such a child would not feel unjust and indignant because of such a cold dream and fantasy. Would he not be angry? Everyone ostracized him, distanced themselves from him, and treated him coldly. His most beloved younger brother said to him, "Don't come back." His most beloved mommy said to him, "We don't need you anymore." His most trusted daddy said coldly, "Get lost. I don't want to see you." Was he really not sad at all? He was betrayed by his family and did not feel any sense of loss or despair. Was he really? Chapter 3643. The white-robed man followed Xiao Yichen's gaze. The scene in front of him was heartwarming and warm. However, the illusion that he had created for Xiao Yichen was not like this at all. Could it be that Xiao Yichen had used his own willpower to tamper with the illusion? An experienced hypnotist would create an illusion to lure the hypnotist into a false illusion. The betrayal of one's loved ones and the abandonment of one's family. In this way, the hypnotist would begin to doubt himself and eventually abandon all of his memories. Yu had witnessed those cruel memories and had begun to doubt himself. In the end, he had been devoured by his first personality, and even his first personality's memories had been sealed away. However, Xiao Yichen did not follow his lead and follow the illusion that he had created. Instead, he changed the direction of the illusion. When the white-robed man saw this, he immediately waved his hand gently and the scene in front of him disappeared immediately. Mu Yichen only felt a blur in front of his eyes and the villa was no longer there. Yu and Yueyao were no longer there either. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir were also gone. Instead, there was a cloud of smoke lingering around them. He only felt that he was in a dark environment where he could not even see his own fingers. Xiao Yichen panicked for a moment but quickly calmed down. He walked in the fog and looked around. He stretched out his hand and tried to push aside the heavy fog, but he could not see his surroundings clearly. "Mommy!" Xiao Yichen tried calling out a few times but could only hear his voice echoing continuously. He could not hear anything else. Yu. He carefully walked through the fog but could not see any trace of anyone. It must be a nightmare. It must be a nightmare. Xiao Yichen kept telling himself in his heart, hoping that he could wake up from the nightmare as soon as possible. However, in the blink of an eye, he vaguely saw a snow-white figure in front of him. "Who's there?" Xiao Yichen panicked and chased after the figure. "Mommy! Yu, is that you?" He chased after them in a panic, but after running for an unknown amount of time, he felt something tripping him. All of a sudden he fell to the ground. Xiao Yichen looked up tiredly, only to see a small figure standing in front of him. The dense fog dispersed. The little guy's face gradually became clearer. Xiao Yichen's eyes were filled with shock. He saw the little Yueyao standing in front of him, looking down at him with disdain. She was still sucking on the pacifier with relish. However, her gaze was empty, as if she was being controlled by someone. What was familiar was her face, but what was unfamiliar was the feeling she gave off. Before Xiao Yichen could finish his sentence, he felt a dull pain in his chest. He looked down in shock and saw a small hand tightly holding a dagger. The small hand at the end of the dagger belonged to the innocent and harmless little Yueyao. She ruthlessly stabbed the dagger into his abdomen, but a creepy smile appeared on her face. The corners of her mouth cracked open, and the pacifier fell to the ground. However, she laughed even more happily and let out a crisp laughter that was like the sound of nature. "Ha, so much blood." Little Yueyao retracted her hand and wiped the blood off her face. She smiled innocently. However, in such an environment, coupled with her smile, it was hard not to shudder. Chapter 3644. Xiao Yichen gently clutched his abdomen. He accidentally used too much force and blood started to flow out. "Why?" He stared at Yueyao in disbelief. He didn't know why the little sister he had always doted on would suddenly stab him so cruelly. "Why?" Yueyao looked at him. Her gaze instantly became fierce and cold. She said in a childish voice, "I'm going to kill you." "Why?" Xiao Yichen shook his head and smiled bitterly. "No, you're not Yueyao. Yueyao wouldn't do this to me." "She wouldn't?" Xiao Yichen's body suddenly froze. The muscles on his back started to twitch uncontrollably. He stood up with difficulty and lowered his head. Another sharp dagger pierced through his body from behind. Little Yichen staggered a step and swayed as he turned around, only to see his younger brother's face, which was as cold and terrifying as a malicious spirit's. "Didn't I tell you not to come back?" Yu shouted at him in a shrill voice. "Didn't I tell you to get lost? Why did you come back?" Xiao Yichen looked at Yu. He clenched his teeth and started to cry. Tears trickled down her cheeks and flowed down her face. He stubbornly wiped his tears and said in a hoarse voice, "Yu, don't do this. I'll kill you. I'll kill you." Yu suddenly pulled out the dagger and kept approaching him. Mu-Chen, after I kill you, Mommy will belong to me completely. I won't have to worry about anyone else stealing Mommy's love from me. Without you, Mommy will only dote on me. Little Ichen's throat churned as the taste of blood gushed out of his throat. He swallowed hard to suppress the taste of blood and explained, "No. I'm not trying to snatch your mommy away from you. Yu, I'm your brother. I'm your brother. Shut up." Yu shouted at the top of her lungs, "You're not my brother. I told you to shut up. I don't have a brother like you." As he spoke, he gripped the dagger tightly and approached Xianxia. "Don't." Xianxia kept crying and begging. With his strength, whether he was in a dream or seriously injured, he was fully capable of capturing the frail child in front of him. But he couldn't bear to. He couldn't bear to hurt Yu. Even if he was covered in injuries, he did not want to hurt Yu at all. "Yu, I'm your brother, don't be like this. Open your eyes and take a good look." Unwilling to let him go, Yu grabbed the man's collar with one hand and stabbed the dagger into his flesh mercilessly. Little Ichen let out a muffled groan as blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. He gripped Yu's shoulder tightly. Due to the excruciating pain that almost numbed his nerves, he subconsciously wanted to push Yu to the ground. However, after a short while, the strength in his hand suddenly relaxed. Xianxia smiled helplessly. No matter what, he could not bear to hurt his brother. "It's okay if you don't remember me." Little Ichen uttered these words with much difficulty. He clenched his fists tightly as he endured the suffocating pain. His back was drenched in cold sweat. With a numb expression, Yu stabbed the man again and again with the dagger. Chapter 3645. Yu's ferocious face kept getting bigger and bigger in front of him. His eyes were bloodshot and they seemed to have dyed his eyes red. Xianxia's body gradually went limp and he fell to the ground. He couldn't count how many times he had been stabbed. Yu didn't attack his vital points. He only knew that Yu was his younger brother. Even if he didn't recognize him, hurt him, and wanted to kill him, he couldn't hurt Yu. "Yu," Xianxia choked and said, "It's me. Open your eyes. Open your eyes and take a good look." "Yu, it's me." "Mu-Chen." Yu stabbed him for the last time. He smiled coldly and said expressionlessly, "I know you're Mu-Chen." Mu-Chen was stunned. "Do you think I've lost my memory? What a joke. I only used you to chase you away from Mommy. Now, I've returned to Mommy's side. As for you, you'll die a horrible death here." Mu-Chen froze. He shook his head vigorously and forced a smile. "No, it's not like this." Before he could finish his sentence, Mu-Chen vaguely heard the sound of high heels not far away. Her high heels made an extremely pleasant sound when they hit the ground. However, such a cold sound was unavoidably a little creepy in such an environment. Mu-Chen looked in the direction of the sound and saw a woman in a snow-white dress. She was walking slowly toward him through the thick black fog. "Mum." Xianxia stared blankly at the voice and forced a smile. "Mommy." As the footsteps approached, Xianxia's tall and slender figure gradually came into view. "Mommy." Xianxia sat up agitatedly. He couldn't stand up at all. With so many injuries, just sitting up took all his energy. Xianxia walked over and squatted beside him. Her eyes were filled with tenderness as she gazed at his face and gently caressed his cheek. "Does it hurt?" she asked softly, with a touch of soothing emotion. Little Ichen smiled and immediately replied, "It doesn't hurt, no." Xianxia's gaze fell on the wounds on his body. She gently caressed his wounds with her slender hand and suddenly, she pressed her hand hard. Blood immediately gushed out. "Ouch!" Xianxia arched his body in pain and broke out in cold sweat. "Did it hurt?" Xianxia smiled apologetically and immediately. She hugged him gently. "Xianxia, it doesn't hurt. It won't hurt anymore." Xianxia smiled weakly. "Mommy, it's okay. It doesn't hurt, but you've lost so much blood." Xianxia hugged him even tighter and said in a heartbroken tone, "Xianxia, it doesn't hurt anymore. I'll set you free." As soon as she finished speaking, Xianxia felt another sharp pain piercing his heart. It was his vitals. Earlier, regardless of whether it was Yue Yao or Yu Yu, none of them had managed to stab his vitals. Only the dagger in Xianxia's hand had mercilessly pierced his heart. However, he could no longer feel the pain now. Chapter 3646. Sob, 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 sob. He suddenly cried like a child, heartbroken and heartbroken. It didn't matter who it was, be it Yue Yao or Yu. He wasn't afraid of anyone who hurt him. Why did it have to be her? Why did it have to be his beloved mommy? Why did she have to kill him? What did he do wrong? Xiao Yichen hugged Xianxia tightly and cried sadly. Why? Xianxia stared at him coldly. Xiao Yichen howled sadly. Why are you doing this to me? What did I do wrong? I'm Xiao Yichen. I'm your Xiao Yichen. What did I do wrong? Mommy, you can't do this to me, you can't? The door to the secret room slowly opened. Gong Xiaoying strode in and saw the white-robed man standing expressionlessly with a crystal ball in his hand. He silently looked at Xiao Yichen, who was sitting on the chair. At that moment, Xiao Yichen was still immersed in his nightmare. He kept shaking his head as though he couldn't believe it. He muttered something under his breath. Gong Xiaoying listened carefully. He kept asking, why? He stood up straight and looked at the white-robed man. He asked calmly, how's the progress? Sure. The white-robed man raised a finger, indicating for him to keep quiet. Gong Xiaoying controlled his temper and didn't say anything. The white-robed man said, I've already created the scariest illusion for him. He won't be able to escape once he enters this illusion. No matter how strong a person's willpower was, it would be difficult to turn the situation around. Moreover, he was just a child. Gong Xiaoying's lips curled into a smug smile. However, he suddenly noticed that little Yichen's furrowed brows were gradually smoothed out. Even his lips were faintly arched. The white-robed man widened his eyes in surprise. What was going on? He seemed to be smiling. How could he smile so freely in such a dream? The white-robed man immediately raised the crystal ball and compared it to Mu Yichen's face. Through the crystal ball, he was able to peek into his dream. In the dream, it was still the same desolate scene. Xiao Yichen hugged Xianxia so tightly that it was as if he was afraid that she would disappear. Even Xianxia was flabbergasted. She didn't understand why he was still holding her so tightly when she hurt him like this. Xiao Yichen smiled, but tears continued to flow down his cheeks. When he opened his eyes, there were still a few drops of tears on his eyelashes. Mommy, I missed you so much. When he said these words, all of the defensive lines were finally defeated. He didn't know if this was a dream or reality. He didn't know if the wounds on his body were fatal. He didn't know if he would die. He also didn't know if the person who stabbed him in the heart was his real mommy or a fake mommy. Even if it was fake, at least he could see her face. However, if he was really going to die, he greedily wanted to hug her for a moment longer. Mommy, I missed you so much. As Xiao Yichen spoke, he choked up again. He forced himself to smile and said in a hoarse voice, Take me home, okay? Xianxia was stunned and didn't say anything. Mommy, I missed you so much. I also missed you, Yue Yao and Daddy. Chapter 3647. Xiao Yichen hugged her tightly and refused to let go. He was afraid. He was afraid that this would be the last time he would see Xianxia. He was in a nightmare, so it was hard for him to realize that he was in a dream. The many wounds on his body were just an illusion. He really thought that he was about to die. Therefore, he only wanted to be able to hold her for a little longer before he died. If he died in his mommy's arms, he would have nothing to fear. Xianxia froze all of a sudden. Yu and Yue Yao, too, froze as if they were frozen in time. These three figures were all illusions created by the white-robed man. All of their actions were under the control of the white-robed man. They were frozen because the white-robed man did not know how to proceed with the hypnosis. He suddenly realized that Xiao Yichen was an extremely difficult person to deal with. Normally, even if one had extraordinary willpower, one would lose all hope and trust in life because of these cruel illusions. However, Xiao Yichen's thoughts were not affected by these illusions. What did this mean? This meant that Xiao Yichen trusted Xianxia, Yun Tianyu, Yue Yao, and Mu Yaja unwaveringly. What's going on? When Gong Xiaoying saw that the white-robed man had frozen, he reached out to push him. The white-robed man was immediately jolted awake. The moment he woke up, the hypnosis was also dispelled. Xiao Yichen slowly woke up and slowly opened his eyes. As he did so, a teardrop slowly rolled down his face. However, when he saw everything before him, he was instantly jolted awake. Tears of joy. It was a dream. It must be a dream. He recalled that the white-robed man before him was the hypnotist that Gong Xiaoying had ordered to hypnotize him. Did this mean that the scenes he had seen earlier were all illusions in his nightmare? Xiao Yichen had mixed feelings for a moment. He closed his eyes and opened them again. The panic and uneasiness in his eyes faded away and were replaced by an astonishing calmness and wisdom. "You want to hypnotize me?" Xiao Yichen angrily said expressionlessly. "You want to create these illusions to seal my memories, right? So, you use memories were sealed under your hypnosis, right?" Gong Xiaoying's eyes widened in shock. Even the white-robed man beside him was shocked speechless. "What's going on?" Gong Xiaoying looked coldly at the white-robed man and said angrily, "Didn't you say that your hypnosis skills have never failed before? What is this?" The white-robed man could not accept such a failure. He had been a hypnotist for so many years, and he had never failed. Little Yichen was the first target that had not been successfully hypnotized. He could not accept this reality. How is this possible? The ice on the white-robed man's face finally broke and a rare expression other than coldness appeared. Shock, surprise, and disbelief were all present. Gong Xiaoying was so angry that he laughed. "I want to ask you what's going on." The white-robed man shook his head and repeated, "This is impossible. Just now, I must have been disturbed, that's why this happened." Chapter 3648. He continued coldly, "Gong Xiaoying, you don't deserve me to call you grandfather. You don't deserve Mommy to acknowledge you as her father. How could you do such a cruel thing to me and you? Let me tell you, Mommy knows how you treated you. She won't let you off." Gong Xiaoying was stunned and did not say a word. The white-robed man asked agitatedly, "How did you do it?" Xiao Yichen looked at him and asked, "What? Don't tell me you didn't waver at all?" The white-robed man's voice was soft and gentle. He sounded like a teenager and did not have the maturity of an adult man. "Your mother's betrayal, your brother's betrayal, your sister's betrayal, and your father's indifference. Don't you feel despair?" Xiao Yichen was silent for a long time when he heard this. Then, he curled his lips in disdain. "So, you used this method to achieve the purpose of hypnotizing memories." After a pause, Xiao Yichen sneered coldly and mercilessly, "What a joke! Why should I believe that they betrayed me?" Xiao Yichen thought of Xianxia and a warm expression appeared on his face. "Mommy will always be my mommy. You will always be my brother. Whether it's Yue Yao or Daddy, they are an inseparable part of my life. Unless I die, don't even think about wiping away my memory of them." The white-robed man's heart trembled when he heard this. He did not expect Xiao Yichen to have such strong willpower. Gong Xiaoying staggered when he heard this. After a short moment of daze, his eyes revealed a trace of admiration. "Very good." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The white-robed man looked at him with a complicated expression before he turned around and left as well. Mu Yichen was left alone in the darkroom. His chest rose and fell for a long time before he finally calmed down. However, for a long time, he did not dare to close his eyes. He was worried that if he closed his eyes, he would dream of those unpleasant scenes again. "Mommy," Xiao Yichen sighed softly. "Yuyao, Daddy, you must wait for me to come back." When Lisa regained her consciousness, she found that she was also locked in a secret room. When she opened her eyes, there was a slanted skylight in the upper left corner. Through the skylight, she could vaguely make out that the sky was already slightly bright. It was dawn. How long had she been unconscious? About a few hours. What about Mu Yichen? Wasn't he locked there yet? At the thought of Xiao Yichen, Lisa began to struggle excitedly. However, as she struggled, the rope became tighter and tighter. This knot was tied with a special technique. The more he struggled, the tighter it became. Lisa calmed down. She held her breath and concentrated, slowly shrinking her bones. Even the Gong Jie did not know that she had the ability to shrink her bones. In the past, when she was in the training camp, she was often locked up. Once she was locked up, she would not be able to eat or drink for a few days and nights. She was extremely hungry, so hungry that her eyes turned red. Thus, she learned how to escape from the cage. At first, the bars of the cage were not close to each other. At that time, she was thin and small, so she could escape from the cage easily. She stole some leftovers and returned to the cage. Later, when they changed to a stronger cage, she began to practice the ability to shrink her bones. She did not expect that she would really succeed. Chapter 3649. Using the bone-locking spell, she quickly broke free from the ropes and tiptoed towards the door. However, she was surprised to find that the door wasn't locked with a combination lock but was chained from the outside by a chain. She gently pushed the door open, and when she pushed it to the limit, there would be a gap between the two doors. Her hand was very small, and when she passed through the gap, she could just touch the lock. Lisa frowned and thought for a moment. Looking around, she didn't find any suitable tools. She suddenly thought of something and took off the earrings from her ears. The earrings were made of stainless steel, and she used some strength to roll the earrings into a long iron wire. Holding the lock with one hand, she aimed the tip of the iron wire at the lock cylinder. Just as she was about to pry the lock cylinder, she suddenly heard footsteps outside the door. She immediately retracted her little hand and leaned against the door, holding her breath in concentration. Until the footsteps gradually faded away, she patiently waited for a while before turning around. Her little hand stretched out and held the lock, using the iron wire to pry it open gently. In less than 3 seconds, a click was heard and the lock was unlocked. Lisa gently placed the lock to one side and carefully pushed open the door. The chain kept loosening, and with a clatter, it fell onto the ground. She heard hurried footsteps from not too far away. It was probably the movements here which had alarmed the people guarding the door or the surveillance cameras outside the door. Her actions had been discovered. Until the footsteps neared, she couldn't care less and kicked the door wide open. She came face to face with 2 fully armed mercenaries. These 2 mercenaries were 2 of the people guarding this island. Usually they were her subordinates. Even though Lisa was much younger than them, but when they saw her walking out from the door, they looked at each other in dismay and timidly retreated half a step. They were clear of their own abilities. Even if they were 2 strong grown men, the 2 of them together might not be Lisa's match. Lisa was young, but her ability was way above them. She was a true killing machine. They couldn't possibly be her match. Lisa swept a glance at them and said coldly, "I don't want to hurt you. Do as you see fit." When the 2 of them heard this, they were hesitant. Gong Xiaoying had ordered them to guard Lisa, and they didn't dare to defy him. However, they knew that they weren't Lisa's match. If they went up against her, they would only lose miserably. Moreover, after so many days of guarding the island and working with Lisa, they had developed feelings for each other. One of them suddenly drew out a dagger from his waist and made a cut on his shoulder. He picked a spot that could heal easily and stabbed twice. When Lisa saw this, she was a little surprised, but she immediately understood what he was doing. When the other person saw this, he immediately took out a short knife and imitated his previous action, stabbing his thigh a few times. They covered their wounds and say, "Lisa, we don't want to make things difficult for you. This is the best solution we can think of this. But there is something you must be clear. What was the consequence of betraying Master Gong? Don't act." Lisa was silent for a moment and asked softly, "Where is Master Gong keeping Xiao Yichen?" Secret room A892. When Lisa heard this, she nodded and said softly, "Thank you." Chapter 3650. The 2 men looked at each other and sighed. They sat down with their backs against the wall and silently wiped the blood from their wounds on their bodies. They also faked signs of an intense fight. Lisa found the secret door. There were 2 locks on the secret door. One was the iris recognition technology, and the other was the password lock. Only by identifying the correct iris could she unlock the second password lock. Lisa's iris was also recorded in the identification range. However, just as she squatted down, she could not help but have some doubts. Had Gong Xiaoying already replaced the iris recognition technology? If that was the case, the identification error would trigger the alarm. Lisa did not dare to act rashly. If the alarm mechanism was activated, the security forces on the entire island would gather immediately. At that time, it would be difficult for her and Mu Yichen to escape. If she angered Gong Xiaoying, she might die. She was not afraid of death. She had seen so many deaths that she was already numb. However, even if she died, she had to bring Mu Yichen back to Yu's side safe and sound. There was a control panel for the alarm on the 3rd floor. Lisa thought for a moment and ran up to the 3rd floor. She nimbly avoided a few infrared defense checkpoints and came to the control panel. There were a total of 2 guards guarding it. Lisa leaned against the door and made use of the metal wire to easily break through the door. Before the 2 guards had time to react, she struck them with 2 karate chops and knocked them unconscious. She immediately cut off the alarm mechanism on the island and logged into the system to investigate the iris recognition range. Fortunately, as she had expected, her iris had already been removed from the recognition range by Gong Xiaoying's people. However, in the display of iris recognition, one of them came from the guard in charge of guarding the control panel. She squatted down and carried the guard horizontally. She walked as if she was flying and carried him to the door of the secret room without any effort. She opened his eyelids and matched his pupils with the iris recognition. The first lock was quickly connected. The guard showed signs of waking up, and Lisa immediately added another hand chop. At the same time, she cracked the second password lock as fast as she could and entered the secret room. Xiao Yichen heard the commotion and looked up. When he saw that Lisa had broken through the door, he was so shocked that he almost suffocated. "Lisa!" he exclaimed in surprise. "You're all right?" Lisa signaled him to be quiet and immediately walked over. She took out the dagger on the guard's body and cut the rope on his body. The rope was very strong. Even with a sharp dagger, it would take a lot of effort to cut it. Xiao Yichen broke free from the rope and finally regained his freedom. He said worriedly, "We'd better leave this place immediately." How could he leave? This was an extremely thorny problem. This was an isolated island in the middle of the sea. It was like a cage surrounded by the sea. How was he supposed to leave? Lisa said, "I know how to operate the yacht. There is some food and fuel on the yacht. It should be enough for us to get out of here." Xiao Yichen hurriedly nodded. "Then we'll leave immediately. To be safe," Lisa continued, "we'd better inform Master Jie in advance. In case of any accidents, he can come to our aid immediately." "How do we inform him?" "The yacht should have a radio that can connect to Master Jie's satellite phone." Xiao Yichen nodded. He admired Lisa's calmness and decisiveness. Chapter 3651. Lisa said coldly, "A normal rope won't be able to restrain me." Xiao Yichen couldn't help but look at her with admiration. "Lisa, you're amazing." Hearing his praise, Lisa remained indifferent and expressionless as she said, "Now is not the time to talk about this nonsense. We have to leave this place clean." Xiao Yichen pursed his lips but didn't say anything. Lisa suddenly said, "Leaving this place may not be so simple. Are you mentally prepared?" Xiao Yichen nodded vigorously. "Of course. Even if I die, I will return to Mommy's side." "Don't mention the word, die," Lisa said unhappily. "I promised Master Jie that I would protect you. Even if I have to sacrifice my life, I will send you back to Yu's side." This was Lisa's show of loyalty. Xiao Yichen's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He asked worriedly, Then what about after I go back?" Lisa raised her eyebrows. She didn't understand why he asked that. Xiao Yichen asked anxiously, "After I go back, do you still intend to return to Hurricane?" Lisa was stunned. She nodded and said, "After I send you back to the Mu family, I will return to Hurricane." "Why?" Xiao Yichen was puzzled. "Isn't your master Yu? Shouldn't you stay by his side and be loyal to him? Why do you have to come back?" "If you come back, that Gong Xiaoying," Lisa said solemnly, "Hurricane was the place I was loyal to. I betrayed Hurricane and should be punished. I won't run away. Xiao Yichen widened his eyes in shock. Suddenly, he hugged her tightly and said in a trembling voice, "No." Lisa was shocked and instinctively wanted to push him away. However, Xiao Yichen hugged her tightly and refused to let go. She said angrily, "What are you doing?" "Lisa, don't come back. If you come back, Hurricane will kill you. I don't want you to die." Lisa initially tried to push Xiao Yichen away, but when she heard what he said, she was stunned for a long time. She was stunned by his words. "I don't want you to die. What are you doing?" "Lisa, when I return to the Mu family, can you stay with me? Since you are Yu Yu's bodyguard, then stay by his side." "Shut up," Lisa shouted. "You're not my master. What right do you have to give me orders?" "Command." Xiao Yichen was stunned and didn't say anything. How could she say that he was giving her orders? Xiao Yichen suddenly said angrily, "Lisa, you're not a machine or an animal. What right do you have to follow someone else's orders?" "You're not a machine or an animal. What right do you have to follow someone else's orders?" In the past, no one had ever said that to her. You also have a life. You can also have your own personal will. Why do you have to follow someone else's orders? Even Yu has never ordered you around like a machine. Why do you think so lowly of yourself? What betrayal! Hurricane has always been using you. Why are you willing to be used by others? Why are you willing to be used by others? Chapter 3652. Lisa suddenly smiled bitterly. She said indifferently, "I was born to be a killing machine. My life has never been in my control. That's why I don't have a will." Xiao Yichen asked anxiously, "How can that be? Don't you have a dream? Have you never thought about what your life will be like?" "My life? You'll grow up. When you grow up, you'll be like my mommy. You'll have a job that you'll be satisfied with. Maybe you'll even find a man you love and have children with him. Have you never thought about these?" When Lisa heard this, she couldn't help but feel a little dazed. She shook her head sincerely without any expression on her face. "I've never thought about it." She had also fantasized about her future. Perhaps she would lose her life in order to protect her master. Perhaps she would kill countless people in order to complete her mission. She had also thought about what would happen if she left Hurricane one day. However, she didn't know what her fate would be if she left Hurricane. For as long as she could remember, she had been treated like a killing machine. To her, human lives were just cold numbers without any warmth. She was already numb to it. She even thought that life was just like that. To kill and to be killed. To live and to die. It was just a matter of a single thought. Perhaps her life would come to an abrupt end at that moment. Xiao Yichen said indignantly, "Life can be beautiful. Lisa, give up on Hurricane. Stay with us." Lisa fell into a state of hesitation. While she was deep in thought, she suddenly heard some strange movements outside the door. She immediately regained her senses and held his shoulder. "Now's not the time to talk about this. Let's get out of here." "Okay." Xiao Yichen immediately stood up as well. However, he had already made up his mind. No matter what, he would not let Lisa return to Hurricane. Xiao Yichen was walking towards the door when Lisa turned around and suddenly shouted, "Wait! Don't rush out." "What's wrong? Come here." Lisa walked to the front of a secret door. She reached out her hand and gently pressed on an area. She heard the sound of machinery operating and the faint sound of gears churning. Then, a large part of the originally bare wall caved in. Then, a row of weapon racks slowly rose from the bottom, displaying all kinds of weapons. There were submachine guns, sniper rifles, grenades, flash bombs, and some melee weapons. Lisa walked to the weapon rack and pinned a defensive master and a desert eagle to her waist with an expressionless face. Xiao Yichen walked over as well. He casually picked up a Nepalese army knife and slung an entire magazine over his back. He then picked up a revolver and an M4A1, only to see that Lisa had already slung an AK-47 over her shoulder. So valiant! The recoil of the AK-47 was very strong. He still found it hard to believe that Lisa, who was so thin and weak, could handle a gun with such a strong recoil. Lisa realized that Xiao Yichen was secretly looking at her. She said coldly, "What are you looking at? Do you have to use such a valiant gun?" Lisa ignored him and took out a few more grenades and stun grenades and buckled them on her waist belt. She asked, "Are you ready?" Xiao Yichen nodded. "Don't you need a bulletproof vest?" "No." Chapter 3653. Bullets at close range could even penetrate a wall, let alone a bulletproof vest. Hence, no matter how tough a bulletproof vest was, it would be useless in front of these bullets. Lisa had never used a bulletproof vest. To her, life and death depended on who had the most accurate, stable, and fast marksmanship. Whoever killed first would be the first to die. Lisa was also taking a gamble. Would Gong Xiaoying's men really shoot Xiao Yichen? Gong Xiaoying had always been cold and ruthless. Even a vicious tiger would not eat its cubs. No matter what, he would not shoot his own grandson, right? Lisa handed Xiao Yichen a pair of goggles and said to him, "Put this on." But Lisa said, "It's to prevent flashbangs." Xiao Yichen put on the goggles. Lisa said to Xiao Yichen, "Let's go." Xiao Yichen nodded. Xiao Yichen was a little surprised as he followed behind Lisa. He had seen many tough guys in the special training camp, but he had never seen a girl like Lisa. She was so young, but she was so courageous. She was simply cool. Xiao Yichen could not help but look at her with admiration, just like a little fan. Lisa shouted, "What are you waiting for?" With the AK-47 in her arms, she walked to the door, raised her leg, and kicked the door wide open. As the door opened, she casually threw out a flash grenade. With a strange sound, the grenade exploded. Alas, Lisa and little Yichen had put on protective goggles beforehand, so they only saw white for a brief moment before regaining their vision. Lisa glanced around. As expected, the door was surrounded by fully armed mercenaries. Following the explosion of the flashbang, everyone's vision was damaged and they crouched down with their guns. Lisa smiled coldly and said calmly, "We've worked together for so many years. I don't want to hurt you. Now, I'm leaving with my men. If you dare to stop me, don't blame me for disregarding our friendship." "Lisa, we have received orders from Master Gong to not let you take him away." "I don't care." Lisa said expressionlessly, "I'll shoot whoever dares to stop me." Everyone was silent. One of them said, "Lisa, you should know us. Gong Ye's order was the highest order. Even if he had to go through water and tread on fire, he would not hesitate. Even if we die, we must fulfill our duty. This is our mission." "What a great mission." Lisa nodded her head in satisfaction. She pulled the trigger and aimed at the mercenary's thigh. Bang! She fired. The bullet penetrated the muscle of his thigh. The man groaned, but he didn't show much pain. Lisa turned around and said to Xiao Yichen, "Follow me. I'll take you out of here." Xiao Yichen didn't think much of it. "I can get out of this place even if I'm alone. Don't worry about me. Just take care of yourself." Lisa didn't say anything and rushed toward the end of the long corridor. Xiao Yichen saw Lisa turn a corner. Then he heard the sound of gunfire from an AK. He was slightly startled and immediately rushed over. However, he saw that Lisa was safe and sound. Only the mercenaries who were lying in ambush in the corner were all hit by the bullets. He was shocked, but only then did he realize that Lisa didn't hurt their vitals. She only shot them in the arms. In the end, Lisa was still a person of friendship. She didn't kill them all because of their friendship. Chapter 3654. Based on her abilities, she could have killed her way out. However, she did not go all out and gave them a chance. These mercenaries knew very well that Lisa had the ability to kill all of them. However, she only shot them in the arm. Firstly, it was to remind them that she had shown them mercy and hoped that they would show them some mercy. Secondly, she did it so that they could give Gong Xiaoying an explanation. Xiao Yichen followed Lisa to a corner and reloaded his gun. He initially thought that they would have to kill their way out if they wanted to leave this place. However, he was shocked to find that the mercenaries did not make things difficult for them along the way. Lisa took the initiative to shoot at them. The mercenaries who were shot in the arm immediately fell to the ground and did not move an inch. The wounds on their arms were only minor injuries to them and did not affect their ability to fight. However, they did this because they did not have the heart to kill Lisa. There were so many of them. Could it be that they could not stop the two children, Lisa and Xiao Yichen? Impossible. No one dared to shoot at Xiao Yichen. No one had the heart to shoot at Lisa. Lisa was also shocked that no one made things difficult for them. She was still in disbelief when they were about to reach the harbor. The yacht is over there. Xiao Yichen pointed at the white yacht that was docked at the harbor and exclaimed in surprise. Lisa immediately said, "Quick, get on the yacht first." Xiao Yichen nodded and immediately ran toward the yacht. Lisa followed behind him and looked around. Suddenly, she saw a few barrels of gasoline neatly stacked at the gate. She immediately walked over and picked up 2 barrels before catching up with Xiao Yichen. Before boarding the yacht, Lisa spread the gasoline evenly on the surface of the sea. When they boarded the yacht, Xiao Yichen and Lisa looked at each other in dismay. Lisa asked, "Do you know how to operate a yacht?" "If it's not too complicated, I do." "Are you sure?" Lisa immediately said, "Then you go ahead and start the yacht. I'll stay here and guard it." "All right." Xiao Yichen immediately snuck into the cockpit. First, he glanced at the dashboard and central control panel, only to find that they were all in English. His English wasn't very good. This put Xiao Yichen in a difficult position. After trying for a long time, he still couldn't figure it out. However, he was now very far away from Lisa's position. Running to her for help would waste a lot of time. If Gong Xiaoying's men came after them, they would be in danger. Xiao Yichen braced himself and stared at the colorful buttons with a bitter look on his face. Although his English wasn't particularly good, he could at least recognize a few English words. Relying on his basic vocabulary, he finally understood the starting mechanism. First, he turned the key, pressed the button, adjusted the gear, lowered the lever, and set the route. He felt the yacht shake as it started moving. Success! Xiao Yichen was pleasantly surprised. After a round of debugging, he was already drenched in cold sweat. Finally, it was activated. "I'm going home." Xiao Yichen's heart was filled with countless emotions. He could finally go home. He could see Mommy, Daddy Yueyao, and Yu again, his family, whom he missed day and night. Chapter 3655. Lisa was holding the gun when she heard Xiao Yichen's voice coming from the loudspeaker. She turned her head in surprise and looked up at the loudspeaker. However, she heard Xiao Yichen's excited voice again. "Lisa, let's go, I'll take you home." When Lisa heard this, her heart felt warm, as if countless warm currents had surged into her body. Finally, a crack appeared on her usually cold face. She gently tugged at the corners of her lips and felt happy from the bottom of her heart. Xiao Yichen said, "We can go home now." He even said, "Lisa, let's go, I'll take you home." He used the word, "we." He said he would take her home. It gave her the illusion that she, too, had a home. "Okay, let's go home." She said that. Even though she knew that Xiao Yichen wouldn't be able to hear her since there were no sensors or pagers. The yacht started moving slowly and gradually left the harbor. Lisa saw that the main force was chasing in the direction of the port. She immediately aimed at the spot where the gasoline had been spilled and fired a bullet at the sea. With a boom, the bullet ignited the gasoline. Half of the sea immediately erupted into a volcanic sea of fire, isolating the main force from the main force. They couldn't get close. Lisa returned to the cabin and walked to the cockpit. She saw Xiao Yichen holding the steering wheel and focusing on driving according to the route. She was a little surprised. "You really know how to drive a yacht?" "Yeah, I've driven one before." Other than especially complicated fighter jets, he knew how to drive tanks on land, yachts in the sea, and small helicopters in the sky. Lisa was a little surprised. She hadn't expected this little guy to be so capable. She went back to the storage room and carefully took stock of the gasoline, food, and water. She calculated that the food and mineral water reserves were enough to last them for more than a month at sea. It was more than enough. She passed the water and food to Xiao Yichen and said to him, "Eat something and drink some water first." As she spoke, she pushed little Yichen to the side, took over the steering wheel from him, and started operating the car. Xiao Yichen asked nervously, "Do you know how to drive a yacht?" Lisa turned around and said disdainfully, "I'm different from you. It's a fighter jet. I've seen it before." Lisa said, "Eat something first." "What about you? Have you eaten yet?" "I've already eaten." Xiao Yichen sat at the side, hugged the bread and mineral water, and wolfed them down. He was so hungry that he didn't care about his table manners. He devoured the bread and water like a whirlwind. After he finished eating, he didn't forget to suck on each of his fingers, not letting go of a single crumb. Lisa was frightened by his shocking table manners. "Are you that hungry? We can't waste it." Xiao Yichen licked his fingers and asked curiously, "I don't know if there's enough food on the yacht." "Don't worry, a month won't be a problem." When Xiao Yichen heard this, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. "Are you sure you're calculating based on my appetite?" Lisa was speechless. "I have to eat at least 4 pieces of bread a day. That's the standard. Are you a pig? How can you eat so much?" Lisa snorted and said, "There's a lot of compressed energy biscuits on the yacht. It's enough for you." Chapter 3656. On the island, Gong Xiaoying stood by the port and looked at the raging fire on the sea. The mercenaries were flying helicopters in the sky to extinguish the fire. The waves were strong and the wind swept up the flames, causing a heat wave to hit them. A man in a suit rushed over to Gong Xiaoying. "Master Gong, the wind is too strong here. Why don't we go back first?" Gong Xiaoying nodded but did not say anything. He turned around and returned to the huge castle. When he entered, he saw the mercenaries kneeling on the ground with solemn and ashamed expressions. He glanced at them and saw that they had different degrees of injuries, but they were all injured on their thighs. He had already guessed what was going on, so he didn't show much surprise on his face. "Are the 2 kids hurt?" he suddenly asked coldly. The group shook their heads. How would they dare to hurt little Yichen, and how could they bear to hurt Lisa? Gong Xiaoying asked sternly again, "Are you sure?" "Little young master is not hurt. We did not shoot." When Gong Xiaoying heard this, his expression softened. One of the mercenaries asked carefully, "Master Gong, do we still want to chase after them?" "No need." Gong Xiaoying waved his hand in annoyance. "Let's retreat." "Yes." Everyone nodded, but they remained kneeling on the ground. Gong Xiaoying did not leave, so they did not dare to stand up. Gong Xiaoying glanced at them and turned back to look at the endless sea through the floor-to-ceiling window. He felt a little desolate. Forget it. Forget it. Let the little guy return to his family. Now he was sober. He was enlightened. He knew that some people could not be kept. Even if he could keep them, he might not be able to keep their hearts. Gong Xiaoying closed his eyes and walked towards the escalator. When he disappeared from sight, one of the mercenaries asked carefully, "I think Master Gong did not intend to stop little young master from leaving." If Gong Xiaoying wanted to stop him, this huge castle would undoubtedly be a cage on the sea. No matter how capable you are, you can forget about escaping. Why were Xiao Yichen and Lisa able to board the yacht so easily? There were keys on the yacht, and it was also equipped with all kinds of sophisticated weapons and radio communication systems. There was even an abundance of food and fuel. Gong Xiaoying must have secretly instructed his subordinates to prepare this. Gong Xiaoying was a prideful person. How could he tell Xiao Yichen that he was letting go and that he could leave? On the surface, he appeared calm and collected, but in reality, when faced with Xiao Yichen, how could he be so cold-hearted? Perhaps it was because he had personally witnessed Xiao Yichen's longing for Xianxia that even hypnotism could not seal his memories. Such a persistent heart had finally moved him. Gong Xiaoying also understood that some feelings could not be separated. Even though he was reluctant, he had no choice but to let go. Hurricane Group. This was not Xiao Yichen's home, nor was it Yu Yu's home, nor was it Xianxia's home. It will take 2 months to reach the port of the capital from here. Xiao Yichen was shocked. Lisa said, "Ashland Island is indeed very far from the capital. Moreover, this is a yacht, not Master Jia's ship. It won't be fast. But we only have a month's worth of food. Then we'll go to France." Chapter 3657. Lisa pointed at the map and said, "It's not far from France. We should be able to reach it in about a month." As she said this, she patted Xiao Yichen's shoulder heavily and said, "You have to be a little more frugal. The food reserves will last us for 2 months. I've calculated that if we only eat 4 pieces of bread a day, we can last for 2 months. Water is not a problem." 4 pieces of bread a day. Xiao Yichen complained incessantly, "Are you trying to starve me to death? There's no other way. That's all we have. If you're hungry, just drink more water." Xiao Yichen looked as if he had a deep grudge against her. "Why are you looking at me like that?" Lisa continued, 2 months' worth of food reserves is already sufficient, okay? We're escaping from a disaster, not on vacation. You have to be clear about your priorities." "Lisa?" Xiao Yichen suddenly stared at her, his eyes twinkling. Lisa cautiously took half a step back and narrowed her eyes. "What? You've changed." "How have I changed?" Xiao Yichen said, "In the past, you were a woman of few words. Now you speak more than before." Lisa was stunned. She turned her head away awkwardly and did not say another word. She was ignoring him. Xiao Yichen muttered in his heart, "I'm telling the truth." In the past, Lisa was like a block of wood. Other than Yu, she ignored everyone else. "All right, hurry up and contact my uncle. Tell him to be ready to receive me at any time," Xiao Yichen said and felt a little troubled. "There should be a radio on this yacht, right?" "Yeah." Lisa turned on the radio and connected to Gong Jie's satellite radio. She waited for a long time, but no one picked up. Xiao Yichen frowned. "What's going on? Don't tell me she's pregnant," Lisa muttered to herself. She opened the door of the equipment and checked the radio line and signal. Everything was normal. Being able to connect and send out a message to the outside world meant that there was no problem. Maybe he didn't bring his satellite phone with him, Lisa said to Xiao Yichen. Xiao Yichen nodded. "What should we do now? The yacht travels day and night, so 2 people need to take turns." Lisa said to him, "Go and rest first. I'll drive until nighttime. You can take over for me at night." Xiao Yichen immediately said, "I'm not tired." "Go and rest first." Lisa didn't allow him to explain. Her tone was like an order. Xiao Yichen had no choice but to return to the cabin. The cabin was divided into 6 parts. 2 of them were bedrooms with a 1.5-meter-long bed, a sofa, a wine cabinet, a TV, a coffee table. Although the Sparrow was small, it had all the vital organs. However, this yacht wasn't small. It was worth hundreds of millions of yuan. Although it wasn't as big as the one Gong Jie gave him, it was still very big. Xiao Yichen lay down on the bed and fell asleep before he knew it. Halfway through, Lisa walked into the bedroom to take a look. Seeing that Xiao Yichen was still sound asleep, she guessed that he hadn't been sleeping well for the past few days. Seeing that he had kicked the blanket to one side, she pursed her lips helplessly. She walked to the bedside and gently covered him with the blanket. Just as she was about to get up, little Yichen, who was still asleep, suddenly reached out and grabbed her wrist tightly. "Lisa," he called her name silently. Lisa felt that his hand was very hot. She wanted to retract her hand, but Xiao Yichen held it so tightly that she couldn't break free. Chapter 3658. Lisa, hearing him call her name, Lisa quieted down and frowned. She didn't know if this guy was really asleep or just pretending to be asleep. She leaned closer to him suspiciously and heard Xiao Yichen mumbling in his sleep, "Come home with me." Lisa's pupils dilated slightly. She looked at little Yichen in a daze. The words that came out of his mouth were indistinct, but every word made her heart beat wildly. "Let's go home together." As Xiao Yichen mumbled in his sleep, he held her hand tightly as if it was a precious treasure. Lisa actually forgot to retract her hand. Only after a long time had passed did she suddenly wake up. She immediately pulled her hand back, only to feel that it was burning hot. It was as if she had been soaked in lava. Lisa's heart was in a mess. She turned around abruptly and left the room without looking at Xiao Yichen again. Growing up, she had seen many deaths. She had been reborn from the blood clots of death. She had stepped on countless corpses of her companions to survive until now. She had never dreamed of having a family. However, this guy was now saying to her, "Lisa, let's go home together." Her heart was beating wildly all of a sudden. Lisa returned to the cockpit. The yacht was on autopilot. She canceled the autopilot and started to control the yacht according to the route. According to the schedule, she was supposed to wake Mu Yichen up. However, seeing that he was sleeping so soundly, she didn't have the heart to wake him up. Let him sleep for a while more. She could still hold on for one more night. Lisa looked at the sea quietly. However, at this moment, her heart was like the calm sea. Underneath the surface, there were turbulent waves. When Xiao Yichen woke up, he sat up on the bed and looked out the window. The sky was already turning bright. It was already dawn. It was already dawn. He was a little stunned. Was it already the next morning? Why didn't Lisa wake him up? What happened? Burning with anxiety, he got out of bed and rushed to the cockpit with his messy hair. However, he saw Lisa sitting on the side. The yacht was on autopilot. She was drinking milk and eating hardtack. When she heard footsteps, she turned around and was surprised to see Mu Yichen walking out with his messy hair. "You're awake? Why didn't you wake me up?" "Oh, I saw that you were sleeping so soundly that I couldn't wake you up no matter how hard I tried, so I just didn't bother." As Lisa spoke, she took another bite of the hardtack. The hardtack was very hard, and when he bit into it, crunching sounds could be heard. Xiao Yichen looked at the dashboard and clicked on the yacht's autopilot mode. Lisa explained, "The yacht is set to autopilot mode, but someone has to guard it to prevent any accidents." He ruffled his hair in frustration and said to Lisa, "Go and rest." "Okay, wait for me to finish eating." Lisa finished her hardtack and stood up. She said to him, "I'm going to sleep. Wake me up in the evening." Xiao Yichen immediately said, "I won't wake you up. You can sleep a little longer. It's okay." Lisa turned around and smiled at him. "My biological clock is very punctual. I'll wake up on my own at that time." With that, she left the cockpit. Xiao Yichen was still stunned on the spot. Lisa rarely smiled. However, she had just smiled at him. Chapter 3659. Xiao Yichen remained rooted to the ground. Lisa rarely smiled. However, she had smiled at him just now. Xiao Yichen's heart thumped wildly. He pretended to be calm as he sat in his seat. He was still in a daze. So, Lisa's smile was so beautiful. While Xiao Yichen was still in a daze, the door opened again. Lisa stood at the door. Seeing him in a daze, she frowned and asked, "Are you still asleep?" Xiao Yichen immediately explained, I'm thinking about something." After a pause, he asked in confusion, "Do you have any other instructions?" "I've already contacted Master Jie through the radio. He said that he would send people to the nearest port to receive us as soon as possible." As Lisa spoke, she pointed at the blinking red dot on the dashboard and said, "I've turned on the radar coordinates. Remember, don't touch that green button." The radar coordinates would constantly send signals to Gong Jie's system so that they could be located in time. Xiao Yichen nodded. "Okay, don't worry. I won't touch it." "Okay." Lisa looked at him deeply. Without saying anything else, she turned around and closed the door. Xiao Yichen stood by the dashboard. Thinking back to the smile Lisa had shown him just now, he smiled contentedly. She smiled at him. Xiao Yichen took out an energy biscuit and a bottle of milk from the food storage box. He opened the packaging and took a bite. The biscuit had been compressed. Even though it was a small biscuit, it could replenish 10 times the energy of a normal biscuit and give him a strong sense of fullness. He drank a mouthful of milk and thought back to his dream. In his dream, he had brought Lisa home and lived a normal life. He had actually smiled foolishly. "What? Xiao Jie, is what you said true?" In the living room, Yun Shishi's eyes widened in shock. She couldn't believe it. Gong Jie nodded. He glanced at Mu Yaja and said with certainty, "Lisa just called me. She said that she and Xiao Yichen have left Ashland Island and are now on a yacht." "Lisa?" Yun Shishi looked confused. "Who is Lisa?" "Lisa is Yu Yu's bodyguard. She was the reason why we could successfully switch you back." Yun Shishi nodded in understanding. "I see." She thought for a moment and asked worriedly, "Then how did they come back? Was there an escort?" At this point, a worried look appeared on his face. "No, they came back from Ashland Island alone. When Mu Yaja heard this, he couldn't help but feel suspicious. He asked worriedly, "How could it be just the two of them? Isn't that very dangerous?" There were too many uncertainties at sea. It was hard to imagine if the two of them could successfully and safely arrive on a yacht without anyone's help. Gong Jie immediately comforted him. "I may not believe others, but I definitely believe in Lisa. She's not an ordinary child. You can rest assured." "Child? Lisa is a child." Yun Shishir became even more uneasy. "Two children? Gong Jie, how can I rest assured with two children? What if something happens?" His lips curled into a confident smile. "Sis, trust me, okay? I've already sent people to help them. I'll be there as soon as possible to meet up with the two little guys." Chapter 3660. Lisa? When Lisa woke up in a daze, she saw Xiao Yichen's warm smile. She sat up nervously, leaned against the wall, and stared at him a little defensively. "What are you doing?" She looked out of the window and woke up. She rubbed her eyes and asked, "Did you change the guard?" Xiao Yichen winked at her mysteriously. "I caught something good." Lisa followed Xiao Yichen to the deck. He took out a charcoal stove from somewhere and lit it up. Then, he set up a barbed wire net. Two huge fish lay on top of it. As the meat was cooked, it emitted a tempting aroma. "Fish? Yes. I don't know what kind of fish it is, but I think the meat of the fish should be edible." Lisa frowned. Indeed, not only was the meat of the fish fresh and tender, but it was also suitable for grilling. However, some sea fishes were poisonous and inedible. Lisa walked over and identified it. She often sailed on the sea, so she recognized it at a glance. "This is a salmon." "Salmon?" Xiao Yichen didn't know what a salmon was. He was only concerned about one thing. "Can it be eaten?" "Of course it can be eaten. Idiot." Lisa scolded him and sat down on the deck. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "How did you catch this fish?" "I flipped over the fishing net and casually fished it out." He happened to encounter a school of fish on the calm surface of the sea and casually fished it out. Lisa looked at the various seasonings next to the stove and asked suspiciously, "Where did these things come from?" "From the storage room." Xiao Yichen smiled proudly. "I wanted to check if there was anything in the storage room, but I smelled pepper. In the cabinet, I found these seasonings and the barbed wire net. Since there are these things, there must be something to grill, right?" I looked around again and found the stove in the corner. Lisa listened for a long time and only came to a realization. That was, the potential of a foodie was indeed limitless. However, it was all thanks to the little glutton Mu Yichen that they were able to eat at sea. Lisa sat down and glanced at the fish. She quickly turned it over, otherwise, it would have been burnt. Xiao Yichen brushed the oil again. Just by smelling the fragrance, he felt a little restless. Lisa complained, "Why didn't you catch more fish when you encountered a school of fish?" "I caught a few, but the rest ran away." Xiao Yichen said helplessly, "I'm not a big fish. It's already a miracle that I was able to catch two of them. This size is considered small among the salmons." Xiao Yichen did not have a way out. "Moreover, if you fry the fish fillet, it will be more tender." "You seem to have a lot of experience." Lisa raised her eyebrows and said, "I didn't know about these tools. Otherwise, I would have caught a school of fish for you to see." Xiao Yichen's self-esteem was inevitably hurt. He felt that Lisa was omnipotent. Lisa glanced at him and explained, "When I was training on the island, I often caught fish." Xiao Yichen glanced at her and suddenly said curiously, "Actually, I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask." Chapter 3661. You said that you were born as an assassin and received a lot of cruel training. Are you the only one? Then, Xiao Yichen hesitated. Don't you feel lonely if you're the only one? Lisa was taken aback and looked at him in surprise. This was the first time in her life that someone had asked her such a question. Lonely? Xiao Yichen nodded and looked at her seriously. If you're alone, there's no one to talk to, no one to play with, won't you feel lonely? As she said this, she couldn't help but recall that when they were young, Mu Yaja was busy. At that time, Mu Wanru was not close to him either. He liked to lock himself in his little world and talk to the toys, the walls, and even the air. He would imagine other people sitting in front of him and talking to themselves. He enjoyed himself. It was really lonely to be alone. When Lisa heard this, she frowned and remained silent for a long time. Just when Xianxia thought that she was going to avoid the question, she said in a low voice, "At that time, I didn't know what loneliness was. I only knew that I had to stay until the end. I was the only one who had a chance to survive." She turned her head and asked with the same seriousness, "Have you killed anyone before?" Xianxia's heart sank. He shook his head. I don't think so." Lisa lowered her head and looked at the grilled fish on the barbed wire fence. She said calmly, "I killed someone who I used to think of as my best friend with my own hands." She had never mentioned this to anyone before. Lisa stared at the sizzling fish, but her tone was calm. "At that time, there were only 2 children and me left in the base camp. We were locked in the same cage. I told him that even if we were to die together, I wouldn't do anything to him. He said the same thing to me. At that time, only 1 out of 100 children had the chance to walk out of the cage. When there were only 10 children left, the other 8 children did not dare to do anything to her. Hence, they were prepared to kill the boy. She finally stood up, picked up the knife, and killed the 8 children. She walked to him covered in blood, sat down, and said to him, 'Only 1 child can walk out of here. Either you die or I die. But I won't kill you. What about you? Will you kill me?' The boy shook his head firmly and said, 'I won't.' Then, Lisa held his hand and smiled at him. 'Even if we die together, don't betray me, okay?' The boy smiled back at her. That night, she slept very lightly. She only felt a black shadow walking to her side. Even with her eyes closed, she could feel the dazzling light of the dagger under the moonlight. She opened her eyes and almost subconsciously flipped her hand over to pin the person under her. When she saw his face clearly, she fell to the wall in disappointment. It was him. They had clearly agreed that even if they were to die together, they would not betray each other. However, he chose to betray him and decided to make a move on her in her sleep. The boy nervously held the dagger and stood up, trembling all over. Tears and snot flowed down his face. "I had no choice. I had no choice. I didn't want to kill you, but I didn't want to die even more." Chapter 3662. Lisa narrowed her eyes and pulled out a sharp dagger from her waist belt. She swung it at the nearest person. Ah! Bang, bang, bang. Gunshots rang out in the basement. However, in less than 10 seconds, the basement returned to its usual deathly silence. The other crew members crept into the storeroom. They were very vigilant as they hugged their guns. When they broke through the door earlier, they kept their guns at a distance and scanned every corner with vigilance. As soon as they entered the room, the fishy smell on their bodies, as well as the sour smell of having drifted on the sea for a month without bathing, immediately filled the air. Seeing that there was no one in the storeroom, the group of people put away their guns and began rummaging through the cabinets. The pirates were here for the treasure. Seeing that there was no one on the ship, their first reaction was probably to escape on a small speedboat. Therefore, they quickly searched for any valuables left on the yacht. The door of the cabinet suddenly opened. Everyone immediately became alert. Before they could raise their guns, an unknown grenade was suddenly thrown out. The group of people looked at each other and glanced at each other curiously. However, the flash grenade exploded all of a sudden. In such a small room, the flash grenade exploded all of a sudden. The strong sense of dazzling light blinded everyone's eyes. Shit! It's a grenade! While the group of people were wailing like ghosts and howling like wolves, Wuxia, who was wearing a pair of goggles, flipped out of the cabinet with an M4A1. He knelt on one knee and fired a series of shots at the crowd. In an instant, a large number of corpses fell on the floor. Wuxia stood up and walked over. He examined the corpses one by one. Those who were still moving their eyeballs were shot directly in between their eyebrows. The other people in the cabins on the second floor heard the gunshots from the storeroom on the first floor. They looked at each other and immediately rushed to the storeroom. They waved the smoke away and walked in to take a look. There was a river of blood. What's going on? The group of people obviously did not expect such an unforeseen event. Just as they were panicking, the ceiling of the storage room was suddenly pulled open and a Gatling gun poked in. Lisa crouched on top of the roof and aimed her Gatling gun at the cabin. She fired at the cabin. Da-da-da-da. A few minutes later, the world returned to silence. After meeting with Xianxia, Lisa carefully stepped into the room. She held the dagger in her hand and examined the corpse on the floor. At that moment, the smell of blood in the room was extremely thick. The two of them looked at each other. After confirming that all the pirates had been killed, Lisa and Xianxia put away their daggers and left the cabin, locking the door behind them. At night, Xianxia and Lisa dragged all the corpses to the deck. After making sure that there was no one left behind, they threw the corpses into the sea. Lisa wore a diving suit and dived into the sea. After cleaning up all the corpses on the propeller, Lisa climbed onto the yacht and gestured to the cockpit. Xianxia pushed the starting lever and the propeller was successfully restored. She then heaved a sigh of relief. Using the radio, Lisa sent out a distress signal. Looking at the route map, she saw that the storm was still ongoing. She had a headache and held her forehead. I wonder when the storm will pass. Chapter 3663. Lisa shook her head. No, I won't. Not all of the corpses of the pirates were thrown into the sea. One of them was left hanging by the railing as a warning to the pirates that if they dared to block the way, they would definitely die. Just as Xianxia was in a daze, he suddenly heard a sound. Upon hearing the sound, Lisa immediately sat up and threw herself in front of the screen. She took a look and exclaimed in surprise, "Someone responded to my radio. There's a ship not far from us." You sent a radio just now. Were you asking for help? Yes. But with our fuel, food, and drinking water, we should be able to last until we reach our destination. Lisa turned around and suddenly asked, Then have you considered whether our small yacht will have enough emergency equipment if we encounter a storm on such a big sea? Xianxia was suddenly speechless. Moreover, there are only two of us. Our abilities are limited. Even though we have enough fuel and food and water, if we encounter another storm on the sea, the fuel will be depleted very quickly and we may not have enough. Also, the yacht speed is limited. Xianxia nodded. Okay, I understand. I'll listen to you. Okay. Lisa immediately sent a distress signal to a passing ship. The other party replied that they were willing to help. Lisa's confidence was greatly boosted. After confirming the location of the radar, she steered the yacht closer to the ship. For the past few hours, they had been on high alert and did not relax at all. Hence, it was inevitable that they were a little tired. Wuxia, in particular, was exhausted. Lisa immediately urged him, "Go and sleep for a while. I'll keep watch." Xianxia asked worriedly, "Aren't you tired?" "I'm tired, but I can hold on." Lisa smiled. "Don't worry, I can hold on. You, on the other hand, should get some rest. Who knows, you might take over after a short nap." Okay. Xianxia didn't waste any time, but he didn't return to his room. Instead, he laid down in the cockpit, leaned against the wall, hugged his arms, and fell asleep very quickly. When he woke up again, he was shaken awake by Lisa. "Wuxia, wake up." He opened his eyes in a daze and saw Lisa's nervous expression. "What's wrong?" He sat up warily, thinking that something had happened again. Lisa said to him, "Do you still remember the ship that we sent a distress signal to?" "Right now, he's about 1,000 meters away from us." Lisa, on the other hand, began to hesitate. Wuxia saw her cold expression and could not help but worry, "What's wrong? Is there a problem?" "That's the Gu family's cargo ship." Xianxia was stunned. There was no deep hatred between the Mu family and the Gu family. However, Lisa did. Previously, her subordinates had killed all the men that Gu Jinglian had brought to North Africa. There were so many blood debts. Now they had bumped into each other head-on. She didn't dare to board the ship. Xianxia took the binoculars from her and looked in the direction that Lisa was pointing at. Indeed, it was a huge cargo ship. The ship's bow was engraved with a huge Werther symbol. That was the Gu family's factory in North Africa. Chapter 3664. There's no room for hesitation. Mu Yichen said, although Gu Jinglian is ruthless, he will never lay a hand on children. Lisa was a little skeptical. Are you sure? Mu Yichen patted his chest and assured her, yes. I'm sure. He still believed in Gu Jinglian's character. He would never make things difficult for the two children. Half an hour later, Lisa regretted her decision. After boarding the boat, Gu Jinglian saw Mu Yichen and Lisa. Without a word, he ordered his men to handcuff the two of them and tie them to the pillar of the boat. Gu Jinglian stood in front of them condescendingly. His cold gaze swept over every inch of their bodies, as though they were being dismembered. Lisa asked angrily, didn't you say that Gu Jinglian wouldn't lay a hand on children? Mu Yichen was so embarrassed that the corners of his lips twitched violently. Gu Jinglian was wearing a black uniform. When he heard Lisa's words, he squatted down calmly and sized them up expressionlessly. Oh, who was the one who said that I wouldn't make things difficult for children? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly raised his wrist. In his hand was a desert eagle. He aimed it between Mu Yichen's eyebrows. Gong Fan, what goes around comes around. I didn't expect that you would fall into my hands. When Mu Yichen heard this, he shuddered. He hurriedly said, Young Master Gu, you've misunderstood. My name is Mu Yichen, not you. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he raised his eyebrows but did not think much of it. What makes you think that I'll believe you? You and I are twins. The two of us look very similar, but there are definitely differences. For example, I'm a little taller, a little more skilled, and a little smarter. You is a little more stupid, a little more eccentric, and a little more annoying. Lisa rolled her eyes at Mu Yichen. At the critical moment, he really didn't feel guilty about selling out his own brother. You scammed me just like that? He was a maniac who cheated his brother. Mu Yichen seemed to have guessed what she was thinking. He turned his head and said angrily, That's right. Why should you pay for his debt? Gu Jinglian thought that this little guy was a little interesting. He didn't really want to kill the two children. Just as Mu Yichen had said, no matter how ruthless Gu Jinglian was, he would not lay his hands on the two children. This was not his style of doing things. However, he had been so miserably tricked by the hurricane in North Africa that he could not let this matter rest. Furthermore, Gu Jinglian really thought that Mu Yichen was Yun Tianyu, so he wanted to tease him. Seeing Gu Jinglian's cold gaze on him, Mu Yichen immediately said, Master Gu, are you sure you want to kill us? My daddy is not to be trifled with. If you dare to do anything and something happens to me, my daddy will be very angry. My mommy will also fight it out with you. Gu Jinglian could not help but ask coldly, You said that you're good at fighting. Let's have a spar. If you're really that good, I'll let you off and bring you back to the capital safe and sound. What do you think? Spar with you? Gu Jinglian smiled gracefully. I don't fight. Xiao Yichen, Lisa could not help asking, Who will you spar with then? Gu Jinglian stood up and snapped his fingers. Hanji. Chapter 3665. Xiao Yichen gulped. To be honest, if he were to fight with such a big guy, would his head be smashed into pieces with a single punch? Gu Jinglian smiled. If you admit defeat, I'll throw you both back into the sea. Lisa immediately said, I'll fight him. Gu Jinglian smiled and said, If you fight, it'll be considered as admitting defeat. He was well aware of Lisa's capabilities. Even though she was small in stature, she would definitely have the upper hand against Hanji. However, this was Mu Yichen. He had long heard that Mu Yaja had two sons. Among them, the eldest was the most skilled. He would like to experience it for himself. After a pause, he turned to look at Mu Yichen and said meaningfully, As a man, surely you wouldn't let your girl fight, right? Lisa's face turned red when she heard this. She stammered, What are you talking about? Who's his girl? Xiao Yichen said disdainfully, Do you think I'm afraid? Untie me and I'll fight him. When Gu Jinglian heard this, he couldn't help but look at him in a different light. He gestured with his eyes and his subordinate immediately walked over to untie Mu Yichen. Mu Yichen stood up and moved his wrists and restraints a little before he got into a fighting stance. Lisa saw this and said worriedly, Mu Yichen, don't force yourself. I'll be fine, don't worry. Mu Yichen snorted coldly and turned to look at Han Ji. He gestured provocatively at him with his finger and said, "Go ahead." Han Ji saluted with his fists clenched. When he clenched his fists, his sandbag-sized fists immediately produced a crisp and powerful sound. Xiao Yichen didn't back down at all. He got into a fighting stance. His stance was a standard fighting stance. Gu Jinglian retreated to one side. With a cigarette in his mouth, he watched the fight coldly. Han Ji hollered, raised his fist, and pounced on Mu Yichen like a wolf. His 1.95-meter-tall figure was like Mount Tai as he leaned over. Like a ghost, little Yichen nimbly dodged the attack and appeared behind him. With a leap, he aimed a horizontal kick at the man's ribs. With his back facing Xiao Yichen, Han Ji grabbed onto his leg tightly. Xiao Yichen was shocked. He wanted to break free, but there was no chance for him to do so. In a flash, he bounced up from the ground and swept his other leg towards Han Ji's face like a whirlwind. Bang! A kick! Xiao Yichen's flying kick landed squarely on Han Ji's face and he couldn't help but stumble back a few meters. Xiao Yichen nimbly landed on the ground, but his left knee went soft. He immediately realized that Han Ji had used too much strength to hold on to him, and that his ankle was cramping. Without sufficient exercise, it was indeed a bit difficult to face them head-on. Han Ji was also pushed back a few steps. He didn't expect the little guy, who was only waist-high, to have such explosive strength. His jaw almost dislocated. Han Ji spat out a mouthful of blood. His teeth were obviously loosened. He wiped away the traces of blood at the corner of his mouth and got into a fighting stance again. "You're not bad either," Mu Yichen said with a smile. His words were undoubtedly a form of provocation. Han Ji smiled and taunted back, "Little guy, you're not bad." Xiao Yichen didn't humbly admit defeat. He said coldly, "It's not too late to admit defeat now." Chapter 3666. As Han Ji spoke, he clenched his fists tightly and glared at Xiao Yichen. His eyes were like those of a venomous snake. Xiao Yichen lightly scratched the tip of his nose and charged at him. The two of them exchanged punches with each other. Their fists were not to be trifled with. They were solid fists. When their fists landed on the wall almost cracked and a layer of dust fell off. However, the most shocking thing was that Xiao Yichen did not show any signs of weakness. Instead, he seemed to be getting more and more courageous. He kept throwing punches at Han Ji's vital points. Compared to Han Ji, although he was slimmer, he had the advantage in terms of agility. He was as nimble as a cat. Gradually, Mu Yichen understood what was going on. He could not use too many fancy moves against Han Ji. Hence, he gave up on horizontal kicks, flying kicks, and high kicks. Regardless of whether he threw punches or kicks, he relied on his brute strength. Xiao Yichen's strength was far beyond Han Ji's expectations. Who would have thought that a mere child would actually have such great capabilities? Han Ji was not soft either. He threw a punch at Xiao Yichen's shoulder. Xiao Yichen did not dodge. Instead, he clenched his fist and met Han Ji's fist head-on. The two of them clashed and separated. Xiao Yichen and Han Ji both took a few steps back. Their faces showed signs of pain. At that moment, Lisa's heart trembled. She looked anxiously at Xiao Yichen. She saw that the bones in Xiao Yichen's fist were slightly red. Then, she looked at Han Ji's hand and saw that a few bones had been broken. Lisa turned pale with fright. Han Ji's fist was as big as a red bean bun. In the end, he did not expect that little Yichen would take his punch head-on and even break his bones. Lisa suddenly felt that Xiao Yichen's strength was too frightening. He had hidden his strength well. Perhaps in terms of skill, she was slightly better than Xiao Yichen, but in terms of strength, there was a huge difference. Han Ji's fighting skills weren't too complicated, but each of his punches and kicks were very solid. However, neither Han Ji nor Gu Jinglian expected that Xiao Yichen's tiny body would contain such immense power. Unbelievable! Han Ji's hand was injured and a few of his bones were broken, but he didn't care. He stood up and prepared to continue fighting. Gu Jinglian suddenly said, "Stand down." Young Master Gu, Han Ji looked nervously at Gu Jinglian, only to see him sizing up Mu Yichen with admiration. Han Ji immediately emphasized, I haven't lost yet. Losing to a child was a great humiliation. Han Ji refused to admit that he had lost to Xiao Yichen. Gu Jinglian said coldly, according to the rules, you've already lost. Getting injured meant losing. Moreover, Xiao Yichen was still a child. Gu Jinglian knew in his heart that after such a contest, if he hadn't stopped the fight, Han Ji would have been beaten to a pulp by Xiao Yichen. Forget it. The contest would end here. Gu Jinglian walked in front of Mu Yichen and smiled. Mu Yichen, you've really opened my eyes. Xiao Yichen looked up at him and asked curiously, did I win? Yes, you won. Then, since I won, you can't go back on your promise. Gu Jinglian said disdainfully, I never go back on my words. Chapter 3667. He cut the ropes and unlocked the handcuffs at the same time. Lisa regained her freedom and immediately walked over to Xiao Yichen. She asked worriedly, are you okay? Xiao Yichen looked at Lisa and saw that she was pretending to be calm, but she could not hide the anxiety in her eyes. His heart warmed and he immediately smiled. Yeah, I'm fine. She was worried about him. He did not expect that Lisa, who was usually so cold, would take the initiative to show concern for others. That big guy hit you so hard. Are you sure you're okay? Lisa was in disbelief. Han Ji had punched him so many times. Did he not feel any pain or itch? She had seen Han Ji punch Xiao Yichen's back and abdomen a few times. The force of those punches was enough to break a steel plate, let alone a human body. Xiao Yichen was a mortal after all. Lisa did not believe that he was completely fine. I'm really fine. Don't worry, I won't force myself. The little guy smiled warmly. So, Lisa was skeptical, but she still had some doubts. Even if your bones weren't broken and your organs weren't damaged, I don't believe that you don't have any bruises after being hit by such a heavy punch. Xiao Yichen calmly lifted his shirt and revealed his muscular abdomen. Lisa took a look and was surprised to find that there was not a single bruise. It was too amazing. Lisa's eyes were filled with shock. How could this be? I learned Chinese martial arts. Ancient martial arts were Chinese martial arts, and Chinese martial arts was also a term used to refer to martial arts. However, in the current traditional sense, Chinese martial arts and martial arts were very different. Martial arts practitioners strengthened the body, while Chinese martial arts practitioners protected the family and defended the country. The so-called Chinese martial arts were martial arts that only killed the enemy and did not perform. For example, Tai Chi was one of the Chinese martial arts. However, Tai Chi had been prejudiced by many people. They thought that Tai Chi could be practiced by any ordinary person. Other than strengthening the body, it had no other use. Now, Tai Chi had become a form of performance. However, the martial arts of Tai Chi did not have so many mysterious and strange moves. His attacks were nothing more than fast, accurate, and ruthless. If he could kill in one move, he would never use two. Taking someone's life was only a matter of a snap of a finger. His leg and hand strength came from practicing the horse stance. The horse stance was the foundation of many sections. The horse stance of each sect was similar, but there were differences. There were only two purposes for practicing the horse stance. One was to train the strength of the legs, and the other was to train internal energy, which was the so-called gathering of qi. Therefore, although the horse stance seemed simple, it was one of the most basic skills in martial arts. In Chinese martial arts, there was a saying, start by standing in the stance for 3 years. If one did not practice martial arts, it would be for naught. If one only had a set of moves without a solid foundation, it would only be for show and not practical. Xiao Yichen had a master when he was 3 years old and practiced the horse stance every day. In the beginning, he found it boring and thought that the horse stance was too easy. However, the horse stance became more and more difficult with each passing day. Later on, when little Yichen was in the horse stance, his master magically placed a basin of charcoal under his crotch. Following that, he took 2 hanging stones from the side, each weighing about 5 kilograms, and hung them on his arms just like that. Whenever he moved, his clothes would be set on fire. Chapter 3668. He had to maintain this stance for the time it takes to burn a joss stick. The time it takes to burn a joss stick? He had to maintain this posture for the entire time it takes to burn a joss stick. Xiao Yichen's expression was bitter and vengeful. Would he still be alive after he was done? Furthermore, there was another rule. The stone was not allowed to fall to the ground. If it did, he would be punished for the time it takes to burn a joss stick. The stone was only a finger's length away from the ground. If he let his guard down, he would collide with the ground. Hence, Xiao Yichen spent the time it takes to burn 4 joss sticks on the first day. That night, he could not even walk smoothly. With this kind of training, coupled with Xiao Yichen's extraordinary talent, his strength was unparalleled even though he was not tall. Mu Yaja sometimes suspected that his son had extraordinary strength. If the car broke down when they went out to play, this guy would probably be able to lift the car with his bare hands even without a jack. Lisa heard this and was so shocked that she could not close her mouth. However, even though Xiao Yichen had said so, Lisa was still worried. She grabbed his hand and reached out to touch Xiao Yichen's abdomen gently. These were the places where Han Ji had hit him just now. She felt around and confirmed that the 2 punches didn't hurt any of his organs or bones. It was the luckiest of the luckiest. However, Xiao Yichen was so embarrassed by her touch that he took a few steps back. Blushing, he looked at her. "Why are you touching me?" Seeing that his little face was completely red, Lisa explained in a speechless manner, "I'm checking your body to see if there's anything wrong with it." Xiao Yichen's face turned even redder. He said awkwardly, "You should be wondering if his hand was broken when he punched me. It's fine. You don't have to worry about me." Lisa looked at him speechlessly. After a long silence, she suddenly said, "I'm going to send a message to Master Jie." With that, she walked around him and left. Xiao Yichen then realized that he had to contact his uncle as soon as possible and tell him that they were on the Gu family's boat. Gu Jinglian had promised him that he would bring them back to the capital safe and sound. According to Lisa, the speed of this cargo ship was twice as fast as the yacht. They would reach the capital in about 10 days. Meanwhile, when Gong Jie received the news that Xiao Yichen and Lisa had boarded the rescue boat and were on their way back to the capital, he heaved a sigh of relief. However, when he heard that the 2 of them were on Gu Jinglian's boat, he was shocked. Gong Jie was utterly confused. The hurricane group had taken away the Gu family's land in North Africa. Now that they had met, could it be Gu Jinglian must be making things difficult for these 2 little guys? "Uncle, let me tell you, I've defeated a super strong big guy. This person is Gu Jinglian's very capable bodyguard. He lost to me." Xiao Yichen was so proud of himself when he mentioned this. Gong Jie was not in the mood to listen to this. He was only happy to see that they were safe. Lisa said, "We were hijacked by pirates not long ago." "Hijacked?" "Yes, near the waters of Somalia." "They boarded the boat?" "Yes." "Then," Gong Jie asked worriedly, "are you guys hurt?" Lisa smiled coldly. "Xiao Yichen and I killed all the people who boarded the boat. Not a single one was left." Gong Jie, why did he feel a chill down his spine and a chill run down his spine? Chapter 3669. Xiao Yichen had spent the past few days on the cruise ship counting on his fingers. He wholeheartedly hoped that the day he could reunite with his family would come soon. He really missed home. Lisa knew that Xiao Yichen missed home all the time, especially when he was under hypnosis and the hypnosis had failed. How strong must his willpower have been to resist such a terrifying hypnosis technique? Xiao Yichen had done what Yu couldn't. She couldn't help but look at him in a different light. After 2 weeks of sailing, they finally reached home. When Xiao Yichen found out that they would reach the harbor in the capital the next morning, he was over the moon. That night, he couldn't sleep. He didn't know how long he had been away from home. He also didn't know if Yu had gotten along well with Mommy and Daddy and if he had regained his memory after returning to the Mu family. In the middle of the night, Lisa woke up to find that the bed next to hers was empty. Xiao Yichen wasn't there. She got up and went to the deck. She saw Xiao Yichen leaning against the railing and looking out at the horizon. The harbor in the capital was on the other side. That was the direction of his home. His home. Xiao Yichen kept looking in that direction. Lisa walked over and teased him, "What's wrong? You're so excited that you can't sleep because you're going home?" Xiao Yichen didn't answer. Instead, he said in a trembling voice, Lisa, do you know? In 6 hours, I'll be able to see Mommy. Lisa suddenly fell silent. It's not just Mommy. There's also Daddy Yu Yueyao. A blissful smile appeared on Xiao Yichen's face as he spoke. Lisa was affected by his emotions and smiled from the bottom of her heart. Are you that homesick? Yes. Lisa also put her arm on the railing and asked curiously, Mu Yichen, what does it feel like to have a home? Mu Yichen was a little surprised that Lisa would ask such a question. To the Lisa of the past, this question was incomparably childish. But now, she actually took the initiative to ask. He was a little curious, but he was also seriously considering how to answer this question. I can't describe it, but it feels very warm. Warmth? Lisa could not help but laugh. It was a vague answer. Xiao Yichen said, I love it when Mommy reads me bedtime stories. I love lying in her arms and listening to her gentle voice. My mommy's voice is the best voice in the world. Listening to her voice, I was able to fall asleep peacefully. Speaking of which, I can't remember all the stories she told me, but I really like that feeling. I never had any nightmares again when I listened to her voice while I slept. Lisa was a little entranced as she listened. When Xiao Yichen suddenly stopped, she asked curiously, what else? Also, Xiao Yichen smiled and said, every time I made a mistake, or you pushed the blame to me, you know that. Yu is my younger brother, so I have to give in to him. But even if Mommy is angry, she won't be fierce to me. If she's really sad, she'll definitely be so angry that she'll cry. I'm so afraid of seeing her sad, so I keep telling myself that I can't make her cry. Otherwise, I'll be committing a huge sin. Okay, also, my daddy warned me before. Chapter 3670. Haha. Lisa was amused by his animated expression. Your daddy is so adorable. My daddy? He's alright. In Xiao Yichen's mind, Mu Yaja was not adorable at all. It was too scary to use the word adorable to describe him. My daddy is very fierce. When I was young, I was afraid of him. He always had a serious expression on his face and didn't smile much. At that time, I wondered how there could be such a difficult person in the world. After pausing for a moment, Xiao Yichen suddenly smiled and continued, later on, I understood that it wasn't that he didn't love me, he just didn't know how to express it. After he got together with Mommy, he gradually learned how to get along with me. As Lisa listened, she gently yawned. Lisa, to be honest, I feel that it's such a pity. A pity? Xiao Yichen turned around and gazed deeply at her. When you were born, there was only killing in your world. Without Daddy to hug you and Mommy to dote on you, you even missed out on your childhood. Don't you feel lonely without a childhood? Little Yichen lamented. If you had a mommy like me, who reads you bedtime stories, dresses you in pretty dresses, and dotes on you like the apple of her eye, you'd surely be blissful. Lisa's expression was slightly startled. Xiao Yichen also realized that his words might have hurt her. His expression darkened and he said, sorry. Did I say something I shouldn't have? He, however, turned to smile. There was a long silence between the two children. Lisa suddenly sighed and said, it's just that you seem to have said something wrong. Lisa looked up at Xiao Yichen and said slowly, how can I miss out on something that I've never had? Xiao Yichen was stunned. For a moment, he was speechless. I've never had that thing, so you said that I missed out on it and felt that it was a pity. However, I don't feel that way. It's just that. She was just a little envious after hearing Xiao Yichen say so much. Just as Xiao Yichen had said, if she had a mother like Yu and Xiao Yichen, she would definitely be very happy. Just because you didn't have it in the past doesn't mean you won't in the future. Xiao Yichen immediately patted his chest and said, from now on, my home is your home. My mommy is your mommy, and my daddy is your daddy. Really? Lisa asked jokingly, will your wife be my wife from now on? Xiao Yichen immediately blushed and snapped, you don't even like women. In any case, since you've said so, from now on, what's yours is mine. We've already agreed. Lisa stuck out her little finger and asked curiously, I heard that you guys make such promises. This is called a retractor. Yes, Pinky swear. Lisa cleared her throat and said, You have to promise me. Xiao Yichen laughed and looked at her. He shook his head and said, Okay, I'll pinky swear with you. He stuck out his little finger and hooked it with hers. Pinky swear. Okay, pinky swear. The night breeze was getting stronger. Lisa went back to bed and pulled the blanket over her. She didn't know why, but she had new expectations for tomorrow. Lisa, wake up. Lisa slowly woke up from her dream. The moment she opened her eyes, she saw Xiao Yichen's excited expression. We're here. We're almost at the harbor. Chapter 3671. We're here. Mommy said that she's already waiting for us at the harbor. Oh, Lisa, hurry up and put on your clothes. Xiao Yichen brought some clothes for Lisa. Lisa yawned as she put on her clothes. She followed Xiao Yichen to the deck. However, even though they could already see the harbor, it was still quite a distance away. She was a little upset and glared at Xiao Yichen. Just as she was about to scold him, she saw that he was staring at the harbor from afar, as though he wished that he could grow wings and fly over there. I saw my mommy, Xiao Yichen said excitedly. Lisa's lips twitched violently. It's so far away. How did you see it? I think I saw it already. Xiao Yichen stared at the harbor anxiously. Lisa's heart ached for him and she gently held his hand. Little Yichen was completely unaware of it as he subconsciously held her little hand tightly. Lisa's heart skipped a beat. She followed Xiao Yichen's line of sight. However, from her perspective, the harbor was still very far away. Half an hour later, the ship finally docked at the harbor. Wuxia and Xianxia arrived at dawn. As they did not know when the ship would dock, they decided to come earlier. Xianxia saw Xiao Yichen waving at her from the ship. She was so emotional that tears welled up in her eyes. It's him. I saw it. Xianxia was so emotional that she could not express it with words. Wuxia also smiled happily and hugged her shoulders. At the same time, he saw Gu Jinglian standing at the bow of the ship. The two men looked at each other, but the faint smell of gunpowder that they used to have when they met each other was gone. According to Gongjie, Xiao Yichen had a fight on Gu Jinglian's ship. Gu Jinglian threatened him that if he lost, he would be thrown into the sea. He knew that Gu Jinglian was just joking, but Xiao Yichen took it seriously. He really beat the guy up, but he beat him up badly. When he heard that, he was immediately overjoyed. As expected of his son. After learning about this, he felt an inexplicable sense of accomplishment. This made him feel even prouder than if he had won a project worth hundreds of millions. They had not contacted each other for so many days. Although he did not say anything, he was still thinking about Xiao Yichen. When she found out that he was coming back today, she didn't sleep at all and rushed over early in the morning. When Xiao Yichen saw Wuxia and Xianxia, he immediately pulled Lisa aside and said, Do you see that man in black? The very tall one. He's my daddy. The one in the camel coat next to her is my mommy. How was it? Beautiful, right? Isn't she pretty? She has a good temperament, right? Lisa nodded, but in her heart she thought, Why don't I see you praising your daddy for being handsome? You're too biased. Why don't I see you and Yueyao? Xiao Yichen could not help but feel a little disappointed that he did not see the two little guys. The escalator was already set up. Xiao Yichen immediately pulled Lisa and rushed over. When they were about 3 steps away from the ground, Xiao Yichen could not wait to pounce on Xianxia. He was not light anymore. He fell into Xianxia's arms. If it weren't for Wuxia's steady support, he would have fallen to the ground. Wuxia was a little speechless. This lad pounced on Xianxia at the first opportunity and completely ignored him, his daddy, at the side. Mommy, I'm going home. Chapter 3672. Daddy. The way she called him, Daddy, completely dispelled the displeasure of being ignored. Wuxia smiled. Okay. I'm going home. Xiao Yichen was so emotional that tears welled up in his eyes. When Xianxia saw this, she couldn't help but be moved as well. Tears rolled down her cheeks. It's good to be home. Mommy missed you so much. Xianxia hugged Xiao Yichen affectionately. On the other hand, Xiao Yichen hugged Xianxia tightly and refused to let go. Mu Yaja hugged Xianxia and the three of them hugged each other tightly. This heartwarming scene made Lisa, who was standing at the side, feel emotional. The family was reunited. She was genuinely happy for Xiao Yichen. How wonderful! Xiao Yichen suddenly thought of something. He gently shook off Xiaxia's arm and turned his head to look to the side. He saw Lisa standing uneasily behind him. People were coming and going, but she was all alone, watching them silently. "Lisa, come here." He waved at her. Lisa was a little hesitant. She didn't know what to do. "Good girl, come here." Under Xiao Yichen's encouragement, Lisa finally took a step forward. She had the courage to take the first step. She slowly walked in front of Xiao Yichen and stood in front of Mu Yaja and Xianxia, but she was still a little uneasy. "Let me introduce you." Xiao Yichen turned to look at Mu Yaja and Xianxia and introduced her to them. "This is Lisa. She was the one who protected me when I left Ashland Island. She is also Yu Yu's personal bodyguard." Mu Yaja and Xianxia looked at Lisa and smiled. "Hello." "Thank you, Lisa." Xianxia hugged her gently. "Thank you for bringing Xiao Yichen back." Lisa's body stiffened when she was hugged. When Xianxia released her, she took half a step back uneasily and explained softly, "Actually, it's nothing." "Mommy, can I discuss something with you?" Xiao Yichen looked at Xianxia seriously and said in a negotiating tone, "In the future, let's make Lisa our family, okay? She doesn't have a daddy or a mommy. She's been an orphan since she was young. I want to give her a home. I want her to be like Yao, with a daddy and a mommy." Xianxia was a little stunned when she heard this. She did not expect Xiao Yichen to make such a request. However, her slight hesitation caused Lisa to misunderstand. She had thought that Xianxia was a little unwilling. After all, it was indeed difficult for her to acknowledge an unrelated girl as her daughter for no good reason, right? She did not like to make things difficult for others. She immediately pulled Xiao Yichen over and muttered, "Mu Yichen, are you serious? I was just joking with you last night." "I wasn't joking." Mu Yichen said seriously, "Didn't we agree on this? My home is your home. Lisa, you have a home in the future too." Xianxia immediately said, "Lisa, just like Xiao Yichen said, stay." But Lisa was obviously a little embarrassed. Xianxia smiled and said, "Why? You don't want to?" Lisa hurriedly shook her head. It wasn't that she didn't want to, she was so nervous that her fingers were trembling. Lisa looked at Xiao Yichen, then at Mu Yaja and Xianxia. She asked tentatively, Can I? Were they really willing? Actually, she also wanted to have a home. It was just that she did not want to force herself. Chapter 3673. Mu Yichen suddenly held her hand, followed by Xianxia's, and gently placed Lisa's hand on Xianxia's. "Lisa, from now on, my home is your home, okay?" Xiao Yichen smiled. Xianxia glanced at Mu Yaja and then at Lisa before gently holding her hand. Lisa's heart trembled. This woman's hand was very warm. She could not help but be greedy for such warmth. It was just that Xiaxia's heart ached a little as she held her little hand. Lisa's hand was a little rough. Her palm was full of calluses from training. Especially on the palm of his left hand, there was a scar caused by a dagger. It was very rough. Xiaxia's heart ached for her. She had heard Gong Jie mention some things about Lisa. Such a young girl was actually the world's top assassin. What kind of cruel training did he have to go through to be able to develop such skills? She put herself in Xiaxia's shoes. If Yao had suffered so much, Xiaxia's heart would definitely ache. Moreover, this girl had once protected Yu with her life. Now, she had brought Xiao Yichen back to her side safe and sound. Xiaxia was so grateful that she could not repay her kindness. "Lisa, stay okay? We're very willing to accept you as our family." Xiaxia expressed her stance. This was also Mu Yaja's stance. Lisa hesitated for a long time before finally nodding. She looked seriously into Xiaxia's eyes and smiled knowingly. "Okay." Xiao Yichen excitedly hugged her when he heard this. Lisa's face turned red from embarrassment, but she did not push him away. Instead, she squinted her eyes and smiled. Mu Yichen. Yun Tianyou's voice suddenly came from behind. Mu Yichen looked in the direction of the voice in shock and saw Yu Yu walking toward him with Yue Yao in his arms. Seeing Yu Yu again, although he did not have the familiar warm smile, he did not have the cold expression he had when he saw him on Ashland Island. Mu Yichen and Lisa were a little stunned. Has he regained his memory? She asked Yun Shishir in a low voice. Yun Shishir shook her head dejectedly and said, I believe that he'll recover sooner or later. Even if he did not, it did not matter. Yu Yu was still Yu Yu. No matter what he had become, he would still be her Yu Yu. Yu Yu was still unsmiling even when he walked up to Mu Yichen. Mu Yichen did not expect Yu Yu to come and fetch him, too. He walked up to Yu Yue Yao, who was in his arms, saw Mu Yichen and was all smiles. She extended her arms toward him. Xiao Yichen immediately took the boy from Yu Yu's arms. Yue Yao, big brother is home. Xiao Yichen hugged Yue Yao lovingly. Even his voice was faintly trembling. He squeezed Yue Yao's little hand and asked gently, Yue Yao, big brother isn't home. Did you miss big brother? Yue Yao opened her little mouth and pouted. Yes. Xiao Yichen was even more elated when he heard this. Yue Yao tilted her head and asked, Did big brother bring anything delicious back? She had just grown out her teeth, so her speech was still a little slurred. Her voice was tender and childish. When Xiao Yichen heard this, he immediately searched his pocket and found something to eat. He passed it to Yue Yao. Lisa glanced at it and burst out laughing. It was a hardtack. Chapter 3674. Yue Yao stared at the compressed biscuit, not knowing what it was. Xiao Yichen took it with one hand and tore open the packaging with his mouth. Then he passed the biscuit to her. Yue Yao was craving it. She immediately held the biscuit in her hands and gnawed on it. However, the compressed biscuit was very firm. Her teeth had just grown out and were very tender. She couldn't bite it no matter how hard she tried, but her saliva got all over her hand. Yue Yao gnawed on the biscuit pitifully. It was obvious that she was having a hard time. This made Muyaja and Yun Shishir laugh. That's great. Just treat it as grinding teeth. Yun Shishir said. Mu Yichen laughed. However, Yu suddenly said, Mu Yichen. He turned his head and met Yu Yu's eyes. Yu Yu suddenly smiled. Welcome home. Welcome home. Xiao Yichen was stunned. He really didn't expect Yu Yu to say such warm words when she had lost her memory. He seemed to recall the hypnotic dream again. In the dream, he stood outside the villa and looked fervently at the happy scene of the family of 4 in the villa. The door of the villa suddenly opened. Daddy, Mommy, and Yu Yu stood at the door with Yue Yao in his arms. They smiled at him. He had been firm from the beginning. Even if the whole world betrayed him, be it Daddy, Mommy, Yu Yu, or Yue Yao, that family would always be his family. They would never betray him. Xiao Yichen reached out his left arm and hugged Yu Yu's shoulder. His eyes couldn't help but moisten. Xiao Yichen smiled with tears in his eyes. Brother is home. Yu Yu smiled quietly. Regardless of whether her memory had recovered, Yu Yu had truly accepted him from the bottom of her heart. Mu Yichen also understood that Yu Yu hadn't recovered her memory, but it didn't matter. They would get to know each other again and get along with each other again. There was still a long way to go. Blood ties couldn't be severed no matter what. Let's go home. Yun Shishir took Yue Yao from Xiao Yichen's arms, and the group went home. Before they left, Mu Yaja suddenly felt a gaze on his back, and he immediately said, Get in the car. While and Yu Yu. And. Mu Yaja slowly turned around and saw Gu Jinglian standing at the bow of the boat, looking down at him. He had seen the scene just now. He didn't know why, but he felt warm in his heart. Such a scene seemed to be familiar to him. He remembered that when he returned from North Africa, he also had the same feeling. They were home. The concept of home was suddenly very clear. The two men's eyes met, but they didn't say much. Sometimes, the expression between men was just that simple. One look and everything was clear. Mu Yaja was expressing his gratitude to him. However, although Gu Jinglian looked disdainful on the surface, his arrogant personality hid a gentle heart. If it had been in the past, he would have chosen to ignore the distress signal from the yacht. However, his experience in North Africa made him have a new understanding of life. He didn't expect that he would accidentally save the two children, Mu Yichen and Lisa. In that case, he had done Mu Yaja a huge favor. Chapter 3675. When it came to the Mu and Gu families, Mu Yaja and Gu Jinglian's names were intimidating. The two emperor-like men in the capital could be said to be on par with each other. Perhaps it was the appreciation between the strong. Even though there were some grudges between the previous generation, they still maintained the etiquette of not interfering with each other's business in their generation. Now, it could be said that because of this matter, the Mu and Gu families had made peace. As Gu Jinglian walked down the escalator, Mu Yaja walked up to him and spoke first. I heard that young Master Gu's wedding is imminent? Earlier on, Gu Jinglian had heard that he was planning a wedding. Actually, Gu Jinglian and Chu Ho did not care much about the wedding. However, Uncle Fu and Xiaobao had been egging them on, and Lin Shi had also added fuel to the fire. They had always wanted to hold a wedding. Gu Jinglian thought about it. After all, the Gu family had not had such a lively event for many years. Hence, he agreed to it. Although Gu Jinglian had previously expressed his disdain for the wedding when it was time to actually hold it, he still personally prepared for it, even though he did not say anything. There was once when he was instructing Uncle Fu to decorate the bridal chamber, and Chu Ho bumped into him. Gu Jinglian was so embarrassed. However, Chu Ho was thick-skinned and took pleasure in his misfortune. She thought that Gu Jinglian was forced by Uncle Fu. Gu Jinglian was even angrier. However, although he was angry, he still made meticulous preparations. Seeing that Mu Yaja had taken the initiative to bring up this matter, Gu Jinglian was a little surprised. However, he did not show it. Instead, he raised his eyes and glanced at Mu Yaja. He asked calmly, "Young Master Mu, are you saying that you want to give me a big gift?" Mu Yaja smiled and said, "That depends on whether young Master Gu will invite me or not." Gu Jinglian snorted and said arrogantly, "Whether I invite you or not depends on how sincere your gift is." Mu Yaja appeared to be very calm. There is definitely sincerity. No matter what, you can't break the etiquette. Gu Jinglian finally smiled when he heard this. Mu Yaja was surprised to see him smile. In the past, she had rarely met Gu Jinglian, but it was strange to see Gu Jinglian smile. Gu Jinglian was a rather arrogant man. He was so sharp that even Mu Yaja was not a match for him. But now, for some reason, Mu Yaja felt that Gu Jinglian's sharpness had lessened a little. On the 1st of next month. On the 1st of next month, which is half a month later. Mu Yaja said again, "I will be there on time." Gu Jinglian glanced at him and did not say anything. The entourage behind him came up to him. He looked back and left without saying a word. Mu Yaja broke into laughter and walked toward the parking lot as well. Along the way, Xiao Yichen was chattering nonstop. He told Yun Shishir and Mu Yaja about the thrilling events at sea. However, Yun Shishir frowned as she listened. Pirates? Are there really pirates? Yun Shishir had grown up in a peaceful era. She had only heard about pirates on television. She had never heard of such ferocious pirates in real life. Xiao Yichen had even seen them. Of course, the pirates of Somalia were famous for being ruthless. If not for Lisa, I wouldn't know how to deal with them alone. Lisa immediately said, "Hey, don't push all the blame to me. You are much more ruthless than me." Chapter 3676. As Yun Shishir spoke, her expression became increasingly serious. In fact, before this, Lisa had already mentioned to Gong Jie that Gong Xiaoying had hypnotized Mu Yichen. Gong Jie had also told Yun Shishir about this matter. However, Mu Yichen did not mention a word about this matter, because it was not worth mentioning. Such a small trick was nothing to him. When Yun Shishir heard this, she was extremely touched. Yu had been hypnotized, but Xiao Yichen had not been affected. She had not expected that Xiao Yichen, who had seemed the most unreliable in the past, would have such strong conviction at such a critical moment. However, she did not take the initiative to ask about this matter. This was a grudge between her and Gong Xiaoying. She would resolve it. Now that Xiao Yichen had returned home safe and sound, It was already a blessing in disguise. Gong Xiaoying. Initially, her hatred for her father was only because of her mother. Her mother had longed for him for so long. She had waited for him for so long, but this man had never appeared in her life. However, now her hatred for him had become more and more unforgettable. He had actually treated Yu and Mu Yichen this way. This was something that she could not forgive no matter what. He was too selfish. In order to keep Yu by his side and use him to fulfill his own ambitions, he had actually sealed his memories. Now, he even had thoughts of Xiao Yichen. How cruel was Gong Xiaoying? She put herself in his shoes. Could it be that he did not understand the pain of being forgotten by his family? Along the way, Xianxia was extremely silent. Mu Yazhi understood the pain and hatred in her heart. He gently placed his hand on the back of her hand and said gently, "Sometimes, the more you avoid certain things and the more you are unwilling to face them, the more it will never be resolved." Xianxia understood what he meant. "I understand. It's time to end things with that person." Mu Yazhi continued, "This matter is between you and him. I have no right to intervene. However, no matter what decision you make, I will always stand by your side." When Xianxia heard this, she was a little touched. His words were more than enough for her to hear. Xianxia said solemnly, "I will weigh the pros and cons." She decided to make a clean break with Gong Xiaoying. She would never acknowledge this father of hers. At the same time, she wanted to make a declaration to him. No matter what, don't touch her family. Otherwise, no matter how weak she would never let her off. Originally, with the passage of time, she did not intend to fuss over the past grudges and grievances. That was a grudge between his mother and him, and she had no right to intervene. However, now that this matter involved Yu and Xiao Yichen, it had crossed her bottom line. When they reached home, Mu Yazhi carried Mu Yichen into the bathroom and gave him a bath. Since they had been at sea, Mu Yichen did not realize that his body was full of the fishy smell. He rubbed the body wash a few times before the smell subsided. When Gong Jie saw that Mu Yichen was back, he was completely relieved. Xianxia asked him, "Did that person contact you?" Gong Jie knew that when Xianxia said, "that person," she was referring to Gong Xiaoying. Xianxia said hatefully, "He is so heartless. This time, I have decided to end things completely with him." Gong Jie was stunned, but he was not surprised. "Perhaps this decision will put you in a difficult position." No. Chapter 3677. When Xiao Yichen came out of the shower, he felt as if he had shed a layer of skin. Mu Yazhi had bathed him, but it was as if he was washing clothes. He wanted to roll him into a ball and rub him on the washboard. He felt as if his bones were about to fall apart. When Xiao Yichen came out of the bathroom, he did not see Lisa and Yu. He walked around the room suspiciously. When he passed by the balcony, he suddenly saw two figures in the backyard. He narrowed his eyes and walked over to the door. He saw Lisa and Yu with their backs to him. They seemed to be talking about something. "Lisa, after being in Hurricane for so long, you're the person I trust the most." Yu turned around expressionlessly. He sized up Lisa and asked in a low voice, "Is Gong Xiaoying lying to me?" When Xiao Yichen saw this, he held his breath nervously. He did not know how Lisa should answer. Lisa was a member of Hurricane. Would she betray Gong Xiaoying? Just when Xiao Yichen was feeling uneasy, Lisa smiled and said calmly, "Gong Xiaoying is indeed lying to you." "Why would he lie to me?" "There are two reasons." "Two reasons?" Yu frowned and said suspiciously, "Tell me." "First, you're his grandson. You're his family. Naturally, he wants to keep you by his side. Second, you have extraordinary talents. He wants to make use of you to complete the Deva project." When Yu heard this, he could not help but fall silent. He was a little sad. He did not expect that the man he trusted so much would make use of him like this. "I lost a lot of my memories." The boy sucked in a deep breath of cold air. "Do you know why I lost my memories, though?" "Because," Lisa hesitated for a moment and immediately said, "Alice hypnotized you." "Hypnosis?" Yu was a little suspicious. "Xiao Yichen was also hypnotized, but you said that the hypnosis failed." Why did his hypnosis fail, but mine did? Lisa frowned and hesitated. Because you're different from him. What do you mean? Yu was a little unhappy. Are you saying that my beliefs and willpower are not as strong as his? Because you have too. These words stunned Yu. He didn't quite understand what Lisa was trying to say. What do you mean I have two? Lisa explained. Alice said that you have two personalities, one full of sunshine, the other full of darkness. As for hypnotism, it made use of this point to use the second personality to kill the first personality. At that time, Alice was also very surprised. This was because, generally speaking, for people with dual personalities, the second personality would never be able to replace the first personality. However, your first personality had really disappeared from your body. Your first personality was the Yu that everyone was familiar with. After your first personality disappeared, all the memories of your first personality were sealed up. Yu listened, but he didn't quite understand. He didn't know that he had two personalities. He also didn't know what dual personalities meant. Lisa explained it to him again. Then he vaguely understood. So, you're saying that the second personality is controlling me now? Yu asked tentatively, can I go back to how I was before? Chapter 3678. Lisa also shook her head. Alice said that there can only be one split personality. Otherwise, there will be a day when one's mind is destroyed. There can only be one split personality between the first and second personality. If you can really go back to the past, then the current you will disappear. Yu was stunned when he heard this. The current me will disappear? Then, Yu suddenly felt suffocated. Will all my memories of the present disappear as well? Just like how you won't be able to remember everything that happened in the past. Because in the past, you had two personalities. One was very gentle and kind. The other was a destructive personality. If you want to get something, you will become cruel and unscrupulous. You will even pay any price. Yu fell silent when he heard this. He suddenly lowered his head and looked at his hands. He gently curled them into fists and then relaxed them. The feeling he got from his hands made him feel that he was still alive. However, Lisa said that if the two personalities existed at the same time, they would reject each other. Finally, one day, the mind would be destroyed. However, was the current him going to give up this body to the previous Yu? He couldn't do it. Every personality was selfish. He wasn't willing to leave this body because there was a longing in his heart. Although he didn't say it and didn't express it, he really wanted to stay in this family and become a part of it. Then, Yu said dejectedly, if I leave this body, will the previous Yu return to this body? Maybe. If he disappears, he might not be able to come back. Yu looked a little stunned. He knew in his heart that others didn't know, but he knew that the previous Yu hadn't disappeared. In other words, the first personality hadn't disappeared from the body. It still carried the memories and was sealed in the depths of the body. He would often dream of that child. That Yu was trapped in a prison. He could often see him and talk to him. He had dreamed countless times that he was traveling on the sea with a child. He was wearing a black shirt, and the child was wearing a white shirt. The child was running nonstop, and he was absorbing the child into his body. Then Yu disappeared. He took his place. It turned out that the child was another personality. He had no way of knowing. He only thought that he was the invader, another version of himself. He never thought that the two personalities were two completely different entities. But he had to create him. Why did he have to compete with a child for a body when he was the one who created him and brought him to this world? He also wanted to exist. But how should he exist? Yu asked calmly. Compared to me, they probably prefer the old Yu, don't they? Lisa looked at him in surprise, but didn't say anything. Daddy is one, Mommy is one, Little Ichin is one, and so is Yueyao. Including you, Lisa, right? Compared to me, you want the old Yu to come back, right? Chapter 3679. On the other hand, he wasn't needed, wasn't liked, and didn't have any value in his existence. Lisa couldn't say a word for a long time. She didn't expect Yu to be so sensitive as to say that. However, it was the truth. Lisa missed the Yu of the past, the gentle and kind Yu. However, her heart ached when she heard what he said. Xiao Yichen's voice suddenly came from behind. "You're needed." Yu was stunned. He turned around in shock and looked at Xiao Yichen. Seeing him walking towards him slowly, he didn't know what to do. He said unhappily, "Why were you eavesdropping on our conversation?" "What do you mean by eavesdropping?" Little Yichen said matter-of-factly, "I'm clearly listening openly." Yu was speechless. Who said you're not needed? Whether it's the Yu of the past or the Yu of the present, we need both of you. Not one less. Yu couldn't help but laugh when he heard this. He pursed his lips and said coldly, "What if you had to choose between the two Yu?" Xiao Yichen was stunned when he heard this. He asked in confusion, "Why would I have to choose between the two?" "Because there's only one personality in this body." Yu looked at him with a burning gaze. "If you had to choose, which one would you choose?" Xiao Yichen was speechless. Yu already knew the answer. He didn't seem to care, but he was a little disappointed. However, he still maintained his cold expression and said calmly, "Your choice is definitely not me, right?" Xiao Yichen hesitated. "Is there no other choice?" Yu smiled again. "Actually, you've already told me your answer." As he said this, his face became cold again and he brushed past him. Xiao Yichen stood rooted to the ground in a daze. For a moment, he couldn't come back to his senses. Lisa looked at Yu who was walking away and felt a suffocating pain in her heart. She could empathize with this kind of disappointment and helplessness of not being needed. Lisa's heart ached. She really didn't know how to choose. If it really came to that point, whether it was Mu Yaja, Yun Shishir, Xiao Yichen, or Yueyao, they would all choose the Yu of the past, right? Even he himself seemed to have made such a choice subconsciously. What about the Yu now? Was she really not needed anymore? Mommy, mothers as aunts, as to know how long's not to be heard. What's the matter? Yun Shishir didn't notice the loneliness and hesitation in her son's voice. Now that Xiao Yichen was back, she wanted to show off her cooking skills and cook a table full of delicious dishes. Mommy, do you know that Yu has dissociative identity disorder? Yun Shishir stopped what she was doing. She turned around in confusion and looked at Xiao Yichen. Frowning, she asked, "Why did you suddenly bring this up?" "One is the gentle Yu of the past, and the other is the Yu of the present. If you had to choose, which one would you choose? Is it the Yu of the past? Why must you make such a cruel choice?" Yun Shishir was a little worried. No matter who it is, Yu is still Yu, isn't it? Chapter 3680. Xiao Yichen continued, "If you choose the current Yu, then the old Yu will be completely destroyed. If you choose the old Yu, then the current Yu will also disappear from your body." Yun Shishir frowned slightly. "Mommy, don't you want the old Yu to come back?" "Yes. Then what about the current Yu?" Yun Shishir suddenly fell silent. She sighed. "I don't want to lose any of them." In the study room, Yu sat on the chair and looked out of the French window quietly. He suddenly felt a little envious. He had never envied anyone, except for Yu. It was only when he became part of his life that he started to feel envious. The old Yu had led such a happy life. Every night, Yun Shishir would read him a bedtime story. Even though he always felt that such stories were childish and ridiculous, he would fall asleep without nightmares as he listened to her gentle voice. In the morning, Mu Yaja would wake him up for a morning run. He gradually fell in love with such a life. It was a life where he could rely on and be relied on. Yu led such a life for 8 years. But he had never had it. Just like what Lisa had said, if he had never had it, he would not have longed for it. However, once he had it and tasted happiness, it would be extremely difficult to give it up. Yu turned around. The desk beside him was where the old Yu used to work. His fingers gently caressed the solid wood surface of the desk. The smooth and slightly cold touch made him feel a little lost. Just like this desk and everything here, it did not seem to belong to him. He had no choice but to accept all of this logically and with a clear conscience. However, he felt a little unwilling to give up this position. What the old Yu could not do, he could do. What the old Yu could do, he could do better. Wanted to stay. Yu suddenly stood up and stood in front of the bed. He gazed at the scenery in the garden. In the back garden, beautiful Chinese roses were blooming proudly. Have the two children successfully reached the capital? Ashland Island. Gong Xiaoying sat on the bed in the bedroom. This bed used to be Yu Yu's bed and Xiao Yichen's bed. His subordinate immediately replied, "As far as I know, the two children have returned to the capital." Gong Xiaoying's eyes were filled with surprise. You, we searched along the way and found the yacht they were on when they left. There was a corpse on it. According to our analysis, it was the corpse of a pirate. Gong Xiaoying became nervous. Pirates? Did they encounter pirates? A few days ago, their yacht was probably caught in a storm at sea, so they turned back and encountered pirates. After a pause, he explained, "But I don't think they were hurt. They hung the corpse on the pole of the yacht as a deterrent." Gong Xiaoying was relieved when he heard this. He was surprised and delighted. He did not expect his two grandsons to be so capable. One was intelligent and the other had amazing martial arts skills. What about Lisa? Didn't she come back? Forget it, let her be. She only has one master in her heart. As Gong Xiaoying said this, he waved his hand and his subordinates left respectfully. Chapter 3681. Everything had come to an end. Whether it was the absurdity, the ambition, or the decades of hatred, they had finally let go. Gong Xiaoying sighed. His back seemed to have aged a lot. It's time to eat. The family sat down at the dining table. The dining table was huge. Even if the 7 of them squeezed together, it was still big enough. Hua Jin had rushed back from the set when he found out that Xiao Yichen had returned home. Mu Yaja and Yun Shishir sat on one side, Gong Jie and Yu sat on the other, Xiao Yichen and Lisa sat on the other, and Hua Jin and little Yueao sat on the other. Lisa only felt that the attractiveness of this table was simply star-studded. Gong Jie and Hua Jin were especially good-looking. Gong Jie was especially particular about dressing up. Hua Jin had just returned from the set, so he still had a thick layer of makeup on his face. Xiao Yichen teased him, "Uncle Hua Jin, aren't you going to remove your makeup before eating? What if the powder on your face floats into my bowl?" Hua Jin choked and said angrily, "Xiao Yichen, I was looking forward to seeing you come home. You're teasing me the moment you're back. I'm not happy." "That's right." Yun Shishir immediately stopped them and said, "All right, it's rare that we're happy today. Stop arguing and start eating. Try my cooking." Everyone had already picked up their chopsticks, but when they heard that Yun Shishir was cooking, they were all stunned. "Isn't brother-in-law cooking tonight?" Mu Yaja said innocently, "No." After being married for so long, Mu Yaja was usually the one who cooked. After a year, he had perfected his culinary skills. Although he wasn't as good as Yu Yu's cooking from a 5-star hotel, he was still good at cooking basic home-cooked dishes. Yun Shishir rarely cooked. However, whether it was Gong Jie or Hua Jin, they all remembered that Yun Shishir would occasionally cook some dark dishes. They didn't dare to eat. Hua Jin said pitifully, "I miss Yu Yu's cooking. I don't know when I'll be able to taste it." Yu Yu frowned in confusion. Was my cooking in the past? When he asked this question, the group of people looked at him seriously and nodded in unison. Gong Jie said, "I've always been picky, but as long as it's your cooking, I can't find anything wrong with it." Yu Yu couldn't help but be stunned. Hua Jin added, "Yu Yu's cooking is very good. At least, I haven't seen anyone who can cook better than Yu Yu." Lisa clumsily picked up her chopsticks. She knew how to use chopsticks, but she still couldn't get used to it. She looked at the dishes and didn't know where to start, because these dishes were all unheard of. After being in Hurricane for so long, she was used to eating Western food and rarely touched Chinese food. Occasionally, she would eat Chinese food, but it was already Western-style Chinese food. She had never eaten authentic Chinese food. "What is this?" "This is steamed chicken. Dip it in the sauce and it'll be delicious." Yun Shishir added, "This is ready-made from the market." After she said that, the group of people rushed to grab the steamed chicken with their chopsticks. Yun Shishir couldn't help but feel speechless. They were so enthusiastic when they heard that she didn't cook it. These people must be deliberately trying to undermine her. Lisa picked up a piece of chicken and dipped it in the sauce as Yun Shishir said. She took a bite and her eyes lit up. Yun Shishi's gaze was fervent. Is it to your taste? Yes, it's delicious. Chapter 3682. Lisa finished the chicken in no time and picked up another piece. This time, she dipped it in more sauce. It was obvious that she liked to eat boiled chicken. Yun Shishi introduced the dishes one by one. This is red braised pork, this is old goose soup, this is… What kind of meat is red braised pork made of? Yun Shishi probed. Do you have any taboos? Some people's religious beliefs forbade pork. Lisa shook her head. I eat all kinds of meat. Xiao Yichen shivered. You eat human meat too? Lisa smiled. Of course, if you're willing to contribute yourself. Everyone at the table laughed. The atmosphere became lively all of a sudden. Lisa quickly got used to the warm atmosphere of the dinner. In the past, when they ate in Hurricane, the huge dining hall was very quiet and silent. Everyone sat at one table and hurriedly finished their meal and left. Eating was just to relieve hunger and it didn't take too long. This was the first time she ate with so many people. At first, she felt a little awkward. However, as she got familiar with them, she also felt that it would be very lively to have so many people eating and chatting together. Hua Jin narrowed his eyes and suddenly said, Today, I overheard a few extras chatting on set and learned about a very cruel dish. Cruel? Yun Shishi frowned. What dish? Sanji Gong Jia was curious when he heard that. Why is it called Sanji? Because it has something to do with the ingredients of the dish. Gong Jia's face darkened. Don't keep me in suspense. Hua Jin was afraid when he saw his expression. He immediately sat up straight and said, The main dish is a newborn live rat. The person who eats it will use a pair of red-hot iron chopsticks to pick up the rat. It will squeak once, and this is the first squeak. When it is dipped in seasoning, it will squeak again, and this is the second squeak. When it is placed in the mouth, it will squeak again, so it is called Sanji. I heard that this dish is very delicious, but it is especially scary when eaten. As soon as Hua Jin finished speaking, the group of people silently put down their chopsticks. Yun Shishi, in particular, felt nauseous. Live rats? It's not a rat. It's a hairy rat. It's artificially bred and very hygienic. How strange. There are still people who eat rats alive. Xiao Yichen covered her mouth. That's disgusting. Uncle Hua Jin, you must be here to cause trouble. It wasn't easy for Mommy to cook a table of dishes, but you ruined everyone's appetite. Hua Jin said innocently, I'm innocent. I only said it because Master Jie asked me to. Gong Jie said angrily, If you didn't mention it, would I have asked you? I won't take the blame for this. Yun Shishi warned, You're not allowed to say such disgusting things again. Lisa, on the other hand, was very calm. No one touched their chopsticks. She was the only one who was seriously studying the braised pork. Xiao Yichen asked in confusion, Lisa, don't you feel disgusted? I don't, Lisa said calmly. I've seen people eat live bamboo rats before. The group of people fell silent. That's disgusting. Hua Jin was obviously disgusted. Actually, it's not particularly disgusting. It's okay. It's just that I don't have the courage to eat live things unless I have no other choice. As Lisa spoke,